Hello and welcome back everyone, we Weeb Online, and today I'm gonna continue the story What If Naruto Had Madara and Kurama sealed inside of him, part 3. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a big thumbs up, and to watch more videos like this, subscribe to my channel and turn that bell notification on so you never miss an upload. Now wasting no more time, let's begin.
Uchiha Complex. Breakfast time. Makoto heard the muffled screams of joy from the backyard, knowing that the boys had gotten her message, and she grinned to herself. The sound of pounding footsteps reverberated throughout the house as soon as the sliding back door opened. She remarked to herself, grinning, "They're so energetic," and shook her head. But she was about to burst out laughing when she heard her husband and oldest son, who were seated and sipping hot tea, scoff. "It's Naruto," Fugaku remarked, sipping tea to calm himself down. "He's a little more than a ball of energy, if you could call the Kyuubi and Madara just a small ball of energy. And somehow he's rubbing off on Sasuke." Makoto put her hands on her hips and glared at Fugaku, and Itachi laughed. Playfully gesturing with her big spatula at them, she reprimanded, "Hey! You watch how you talk about my boys." It was Fugaku's turn to smile now, casting a knowing glance at his wife. He said, "I see the kid's gotten to you too, which made her turn her head and blush a little. "He's been around us way too much. He called me dad the other day, you know? I didn't really even notice that until later that evening when I was relaxing." Makoto nodded, fully understanding. To them, Naruto was as much of a son as young Sasuke and Itachi. He spent 2 meals a day on average with them, and occasionally he slept over. Every day, he trained and played with Sasuke and Itachi, and they both felt at ease in his presence. Both of them loved him, and he loved them back. As soon as Naruto and Sasuke dashed into the kitchen, they made sure their plates were on their mats and leapt to their seats to begin eating. Scooping the last of the eggs onto the plate in the middle of the table, Makoto carried her pan over to the dining room table. She asked, casting a motherly glance at the boys, "Did you guys wash your hands?" Naruto and Sasuke both sighed simultaneously as they showed her their spotless hands. They all said, "Yes, Mom," eager to get started. With a giggle, she put away her pot and sat down across from Fugaku. She clapped her hands together and said, "Great, let's say grace, now." Everyone clapped their hands together in imitation of her, even Itachi. As was customary in the Uchiha household, they all shouted, "Itadakimasu," together. Rather than diving for the plate of eggs and piling copious amounts onto their plates, Naruto and Sasuke hesitated. Meat and rice portions were also present. They were all arranged in the middle of the table, their aromas enticing the cook to take a bite. As he took his portion first, Fugaku remarked, "I see you've learned your manners." That was the custom. He had to remind Naruto and Sasuke several times that it was proper etiquette to not eat all the food first. "I'm glad you've taught yourself our ways, rather than Shisui's." Now that boy would have already cleaned off the entire table. God knows how he's so fast when he eats so much. With the realization that Shisui was, in fact, just as quick to eat as he was to fight, everyone laughed lightly, some more than others. Makoto asked no one in particular, "Where is Shisui, by the way?" while she ladled rice onto her own plate. "He didn't say he was going on any missions today, right?" Fugaku swallowed his food and said, "He's got a meeting with the Hokage this morning. Didn't I tell you this already?" Makoto shook her head, wondering what his purpose was. Knowing what was going on, Naruto and Sasuke smiled knowingly at one another. Itachi said, helping himself to the food before Naruto and Sasuke could, "He's retiring from the Anbu. He wants to become a full-fledged Jonin." Having never heard of this news before, Makoto questioned, "Really?" With a curious look in his direction, she said, "Why is he trying to do that? I thought he was going to become an Anbu captain with you, Itachi?" Itachi took a sip of his tea and shrugged. He looked amusedly at Naruto and Sasuke, who were grinning wildly, and said, "Change of plans. I'm going to be the captain of the Anbu. There can only be one. And he. Well, I'm sure Naruto is dying to explain to you." Makoto turned to face them, her eyebrows going up in wonder. "He's going to be our Jonin sensei," Naruto exclaimed, momentarily losing track of the meal. Continuing for him, Sasuke expressed the same level of happiness. "Yeah, Naruto and I are going to graduate together, and Shisui will be our sensei." He even agreed to it. Makoto liked the idea and gave it a nod of approval. Still, She glanced sideways at Itachi. She looked at Itachi with concern and said, "What about you, Itachi? Are you sure you don't want to become a Jonin and have your own team?" Itachi shook his head and scoffed. Although he smirked and talked over the complaints, he received multiple complaints for saying, "I don't have the patience to deal with incompetents like Naruto and Sasuke. That's more of Shisui's thing anyway. I told you, I'm going to become the head of the Anbu. Think about our family then. Father will be the head of the Uchiha and the police force. I will be head of the Anbu. Sasuke Tuto dreams of becoming the Hokage." With a frown, Naruto acknowledged that he didn't quite fit the description. Itachi concluded, "And Naruto Tuto will probably become Konoha's head ninja with his potential," which made Naruto smile once more. Who knows, he might even take position as the head of the Uchiha too, making the Uchiha even stronger. Fugaku laughed as he turned to face his large family. "Let's focus on the simpler things right now. Naruto and Sasuke still need to pass the academy. Do you even have any plans for that?" It was Naruto's turn to laugh now. Shisui is going to tell us how to pass easily and be on the same team. Shisui barely passed the academy himself, Fugaku chuckled in a subtle way. With ambition in his eyes, Sasuke went on, "But he did it in 1 year. We could do that too, we could." When Itachi spoke up, Sasuke stopped and got up to put his plate away. "No, not 1 year. That was our mistake. If we would have stayed in the academy for the full 4 years, we would have become even stronger. Once you become a genin, you have a training schedule with a sensei, and you have to go on stupid D-ranked missions, no matter how talented you are. Even Shisui and I had to do dozens of D-ranks, which I'm sure you'll learn to hate as well. Anyways, you get to train more if you stay in the academy, so that's what you should do." With great anticipation, Naruto and Sasuke nodded, almost as if they were taking notes. Their idols were Itachi and Shisui, who would follow orders without question. Not being a ninja herself, Makoto questioned, "Aren't there 3 people on a genin team? Who will be your third teammate? Surely it must also be a girl?" While Sasuke shrugged off the situation, not really understanding or caring, and carried on eating, Naruto sighed and rested his cheek on his hand, his thoughts straying to one specific girl who he knew fit the description. Hyuga Manor Hinata, 7 years old, sighed as she sat down on her bed and held her fox doll in her arms. Today was the big day. She would finally be entering the academy. She had an enormous pressure to be talented because she was a Senju and a Hyuga. Hiyashi had trained her for years and made it plain that he would not put up with her embarrassing him and the honor of the clan by not finishing first in the class. For him, anything less than first place was a failure. That wasn't surprising at all that he finished the year at the top of his class. He was talented beyond belief. She had no doubt that if he had desired, he could have graduated in 1 year and become a genin. And he was strong, even stronger than her, something that Hiyashi seemed to bring up all the time. Neji, on the other hand, saw things differently. He was a year older than her. She was shocked to learn that Hisashi, Hiyashi's brother and Neji's father, is related to the head at all. He was nice. Much more of a father than Hiyashi was to her, and whenever she wasn't training with her father or sleeping, she would be spending time with the branch family, which was much nicer than the main family. He would treat her wounds, teaching her things that would help her form and progress, so that the next time she would train, she would be better. Hisashi was powerful. He certainly knew what he was. That didn't matter. She knew that she liked Hisashi like a father, which made Neji her brother in theory, but he didn't care. Ever since she could remember, he had treated her nicely, almost like she was his sister. She was treated as though she was important, not because of her last name or her chakra, but because of who she was. He would always encourage her to work hard so that one day she would become a powerful clan head, even though she had no desire to become a ninja at all. The only reasons she had for attending the academy were the following. The dream of Hinata becoming a medical ninja. There was no denying that she had a wonderful chakra, and Hisashi had told her that it was the strongest and purest in the world. Despite her chakra's strength, though, Hinata would much rather use it for healing than for harm. But why even become that? Because of Naruto, who was essentially the only reason she wanted anything at all. He was the first person to ever truly care about her and the light in her world. Despite how precious he was to her, the rest of the village treated him like scum, beating and hurting him beyond belief. Whenever she found him in the academy, covered in blood, she prayed to the gods that she would be able to heal him. But she never did. She lacked the talent to help him endure the pain, as much as she would have liked to. But she would become the world's greatest healer. But would that be enough for Naruto? He had to deal with more than just physical pain. There were times, before she had met him, when she would find him sobbing to himself while hiding behind a tree. She hadn't given it much thought at the time, but now. Hinata-san. Hinata looked over to the door and heard Neji's voice on the other side, saying, "Enter now." "I understand," she replied, setting her doll aside. Neji entered through the smoothly opened door, her training clothes from the Hyuga branch member, loose and comfortable, and she quickly looked over her outfit, comparing it to her brother. Her fabrics were more expensive and elegant, and her style was similar to his, though her loose robes were fancy yet still allowed enough movement for training. "You are aware that your ninja career officially began today, right?" With kindness mixed in, he asked in a knowing voice, and Hinata grinned as she jumped off the bed and brushed off her clothes. "I know, of course. It was actually quite appropriate for a member of the main branch like herself," she said, putting her hands on her hips and glaring at him. Coolly, and with a look of surprise, Neji held up his hands in defense. "Really? I simply assumed you would be a little more enthusiastic. You should finally meet this, Naruto-kun. You've been talking about, after all, shouldn't it?" Hinata turned her head to the side, her cheeks taking on an odd red hue, and Neji grinned, bullseye. She stammered, saying, "Anyo," which was unusual for her, especially after spending so much time with Hiyashi. "I am excited, I'm just that." Neji sighed, dragging her from the room and accompanying her down the hallway. "Wait," she remarked, attempting to break free from the drag, "I forgot to bring any supplies or my kunai." Neji shook his head and laughed softly. "What a joke. It's time to discover just how weak other children your age are, or more accurately, just how much of a better childhood they had than you had." Better childhoods? Hinata's eyebrows shot up at the somewhat somber tone in which he ended his statement. Neji said, shaking his head once more to get rid of the sudden anxiety that had taken over. "Whatever," he continued, "you'll be fine. By a wide margin, I emerged as the class winner. No rivalry, but Dad tells me you have some pretty interesting classmates." With a worried expression on her face, Hinata grasped Neji's arm almost for safety. "Are you serious?" Fearing the worst, she asked, wondering what her father would think of her if she didn't make the top spot in the class. "Indeed," Neji said, "very interesting. Many of the clan head's offspring are in your class, including the head ninja's son, who is, I believe, Inara. Heir to the Aburame, Akamichi, Yamanaka, and Inazuka families, and Uchiha." The voice behind them startled both Neji and Hinata, who straightened in respect upon realizing it was Hiyashi standing behind them with his young daughter Hanabi standing beside him. Both Neji and Hinata would snicker at the sight of such a cute and young girl, Hanabi, with such a serious expression on her face, crossing her arms in the same manner as her father. With a grave and menacing tone, Hiyashi went on, "I don't care about any of the other clans. They aren't competition for the Hyuga. But the Uchiha are really quite talented. Many believe that they are actually a superior clan to the Hyuga." Hiyashi may not be one to scream, but when he wanted to, his words were sharper than kunai, and both Neji and Hinata stood frozen in place at this statement, not knowing what would come next. "Hinata, that's where you're going to set them straight. Neji performed admirably last year, for a member of the branch, in showcasing the Hyuga's strength. His abilities were superior to everyone, and his Byakugan was activated at a young age. I'm hoping, praying, that you'll follow suit. You won't degrade the Hyuga in any way, and you won't allow the Uchiha to surpass our clan." He and Hanabi then left, leaving Hinata and Neji alone once more, though their apparent happy mood was ruined. "How about we go into the kitchen together?" Neji needed to make sure Hinata was more at ease when she arrived at the academy on her first day, and cooking seemed to calm her down. Observing how shaken up Hinata was, he pressed her fingers together, knowing from experience that it was a bad habit she fell into when she was nervous or worried. He nudged her forward, saying, "Come on, you can make lunch for the two of us today." With a sigh, Hinata folded her arms and looked away. No thanks. Since we're not having lunch today anyhow, I should go meditate in my room before presenting myself to the public." After that, she quietly disappeared into her room, leaving a very irate Neji in her wake. He detested everything Hiyashi had done to her, including physiologically torturing her. Why would he want to sabotage her day's excitement? Storming off in the opposite direction, he had a habit of going to destroy several Uchiha dummies in the training area when he got steamed up like this. Uchiha Estate, Rear Garden. Shisui grinned as he looked down at his two students in front of him. Naruto and Sasuke seemed happy about the academy, which made him happy as well. The academy was enjoyable for him because he enjoyed competing with Itachi to see who was better, and he was sure that these two would feel the same way. Shisui grabbed their attention right away, saying, "Now, believe me, you two are going to be surprised when you first go there." He loved how the two held on to every word he said. The academy is meant for those who haven't been trained yet, so a bunch of kids who don't have ninja for parents are going to show up. Standing beside Shisui, Itachi nodded his head in agreement. "So I think it's safe to say that you two could skip every day of the academy and still become genin," Itachi said. Shisui smiled at his best friend and said, "Surprisingly, Itachi has the right idea." Itachi smiled again and said, "You two are going to have to plan on how you want to graduate," which confused Naruto and Sasuke. "What are you trying to say?" Sasuke inquired, attempting to comprehend. Shisui elaborated, saying, "Well, you don't pick your own teams when you graduate. They pick teams based off of the ability of the students." He was quite the reader of everything ninja. When he didn't have a house, all he ever did was eat, train, steal, read, and sleep, so he was surprised that he had never heard how they select genin teams. "So I'm guessing that the best students get put together to make the best genin teams, and the rest don't become genin," Naruto concluded thoughtfully. "Actually, it's just the opposite," Itachi said clearly. "They put the best over kid with the worst kid, and because there are 3 ninja on a squad, they add in the best academic on the team. At least, that's the most obvious team that they have to do each year," said Naruto as his and Sasuke's eyes grew wide as they exchanged glances. Itachi continued, "As I previously stated, they selected the other teams based on the unusual abilities. However, the best overall, worst overall, and best academic teams are determined annually." With his head spinning from all the thoughts, Sasuke collapsed onto the floor. What on earth did this mean? Sasuke began, reaching a decision, "So if we want to be on a team together." With a cross of his arms, Naruto concluded, "One of us has to be the worst in the class." "Not exactly," asserted Shisui, raising a hand. "One of you just needs to be the best in academics." Shisui shook his head. "This implies that one of you will need to intentionally put in more time in the books and perform poorly on the non-academic tasks." Naruto's eyes grew brighter as he realized, "Yeah, now that I understand, Sasuke may have performed the best overall, but he made a few mistakes on the tests. I could also pretend to be terrible at everything else while acing the exams." "Yep, that's the game plan," Shisui said, happy that the two boys understood. "And come time for genin teams, I can request Sasuke Uchiha or something, because we're both Uchiha." Itachi nodded. "Then, by default, Naruto, you would be on my side." Since the academy was meant to be some kind of practical joke, they would all understand what needed to be done and why, and they would all cooperate to earn their places on Shisui's team. This could work. "There's going to be a Hyuga in your class, and you know how we all feel about that clan," Itachi added as they drew to a close. Naruto and Sasuke nodded, neither of them having the slightest interest in the Hyuga. "What pricks? They have a child enrolled in your course. Does that make sense? Dad wanted me to make sure you know how important it is to totally outperform her in every way." Shaking their heads, Naruto and Sasuke grinned to themselves, knowing they would prove to the Hyuga clan who was the best. Konoha Sasuke and Naruto strolled hand in hand, their ultimate goal being the academy. They had everything planned out. Sasuke would be the overachievers, Shisui said he wouldn't even need to try hard, while Naruto, with his startlingly large knowledge, would be the bookworm. Afterwards, they would be teammates. Finally, the academy came into view, and both boys saw the worried parents dropping off their worried children. Fugaku didn't bother with this, which was refreshing because it made Sasuke and Naruto feel good about themselves because he trusted them enough to know that the academy wouldn't be difficult. Sasuke said, "Looks like the parents think this is a daycare center," as he relaxedly put his hands in his shorts pockets. He and Naruto were both wearing Uchiha shirts with the emblem on the back. but Sasuke's was dark blue and Naruto's was black. They were also wearing tan shorts with side ninja pouches. What a joke, Naruto said, continuing to be equally as carefree as Sasuke. His heart was racing, and he wasn't sure what to do when he saw her, so he used his carefree body gesture as cover as his blue eyes darted around, looking for a specific senju that should be showing up. But Naruto was able to sense Sasuke's anxiety and gave him a knowing smile when he said, "Are you still searching for that one girl you told me about?" he asked, causing Naruto to nod slowly. "I'm really looking forward to meeting her. If she's anything like what you described to me, then." Sasuke abruptly stopped moving, and Naruto followed suit, staring at him bewildered. "What's going on?" Seeing a look of fear in Sasuke's eyes, Naruto inquired. Sasuke immediately used a single swing to attack one of the taller branches of a nearby tree, pulling Naruto behind it so that only the thick trunk and shade could hide them from view, but Sasuke kept his terrified gaze fixed forward. "It's him," declared Sasuke in a general way, completely ignoring Naruto. "You know, the guy we blew up the dumpster on, and he chased us, and Shisui saved us at the last second. He is the chief of our adversarial clan, the Hyuga." Looking around the tree right away, Naruto saw the man Sasuke was referring to. It was the adult, cold-blooded man who had almost. The man turned to face whoever was standing next to him, and Naruto's thoughts stopped completely. "Aku," Sasuke said, observing the girl standing next to Hiyashi. "I wonder who that girl is, or maybe I don't want to know. She's probably just as much of a prick as Hiyashi as if they are related." Sasuke chuckled to himself, but he looked curiously at Naruto, wondering why Naruto wasn't even slightly amused. "Well, it seems like we need to outperform her, don't we? She doesn't look all that impressive, so shouldn't be too hard," he asked, speaking more to himself now. Even though Sasuke was wondering why Naruto appeared to be in a trance, he ignored it and calmly waited for the man to drop off his daughter and go. They might be running late for class, but Sasuke would much rather be late than have to go near that man. He shivered a little and hid behind the trunk, dragging Naruto down with him. After 10 minutes, the classroom there were at least 30 children in the room, but Hinata sat in the back, keeping a close eye on the students beneath her. What was going on? Taking a deep breath, she tried to center herself. She was not to mingle with other clan heirs, she was not to socialize, she was not to divert her attention from her studies, and above all, she was not to bring shame upon the Hyuga. Not only was she not a Hyuga, but she was strangely not even a Hyuga herself. Hyuga this, Hyuga that. "Students, calm down." It took some time, but all of the students eventually quieted down, causing the brown-haired man in the front of the room to smile. "Fantastic. Before we get started, let me go over this list. I believe everyone has checked off their names." The class's teacher, Uruka, looked over the list and nodded occasionally, noting that everyone was present. However, wait just a moment, where the two? A murmur went through the class as soon as the door opened and nobody else but Naruto Uchiha calmly walked through it, his hands in his pockets. Apparently, this kid was well known for a number of reasons. First, he was known as a delinquent, then he was known as a Uchiha. What exactly was he? The door opened again, a little more roughly this time, and Naruto called out to the sensei, "Uchiha." Naruto, making sure to pronounce the Uchiha part loud and proud. "Sorry I couldn't come on time. We ran into a little trouble." He grinned at the teacher and was about to take his seat. It was Sasuke's turn now, and he entered the room with less grace than before, clearly showing signs of being roughed up. He approached Naruto directly, ignoring the students and the teacher, and glaring at the blonde, who was now grinning and nervously scratching the back of his head. "Not cool, bro," Sasuke growled, a little irate. Shrugging away from the issue, Naruto said, "I thought it was pretty cool. They certainly did, too." As if on cue, the door opened a third time, letting in two chunin who appeared to be in rough shape, breathing heavily, and waving at Uruka. "We were trying to tackle that little brat," they pointed to Naruto, "but the Gaki must have used a Kawarimi or something, because we hit Sasuke," they said, sounding a little sheepish, though Sasuke ignored the thanks. While Naruto laughed, Sasuke scoffed and crossed his arms, but Uruka allowed his eyebrows to rise high on his forehead. "I'm sure everything is well, and Sasuke the child doesn't appear to be hurt. You may now depart," he said slowly, and the chunin followed. He shook his head, crossing Sasuke off the list. What had he gotten himself into? A class full of clan heirs, and now a young person who was well known among ninja for deceiving elite ninja and who seemed to be able to use the Kawarimi. You two can take a seat in the back, Iruka said, clearing his throat. This year's class is full, so all of the seats are reserved. Both Naruto and Sasuke shrugged and moved to the rear of the room to sit down. The Hinata Senju, the real Hinata Senju, was seated 2 seats to his right, his eyes wide, but Naruto was too preoccupied with suppressing his laughter to notice. Iruka repeated, "All right class," from the front as everything had now become clear. Let me introduce myself. My name is Iruka, and you can all call me Iruka-sensei. If you decide to continue in the program, I will be your teacher for the next 4 years. You may all be aware that you enrolled in the academy to train to become ninjas. You may believe that you want to train to be a ninja, but you're not sure. Upon hearing this, a few of the children began chatting once more, unsure of his meaning. At the moment, I'm sure the majority of you just want to be powerful and enjoy going on awesome missions. If that's the case, I strongly advise you to reevaluate your plans for the future. Being a ninja is a matter of life or death rather than leisure and self-serving goals. If you become a ninja, I guarantee all of you that eventually you will face death. All of you. Whether it is yourself or your teammate, death will come to a ninja in many different ways. You think that being a ninja is about being cool? Did you think that being a ninja is about choosing whether or not to kill your teammate or fail the mission and cause a war? Even the few students who were chatting in the back of the room fell silent as Iruka gave these kids his famous ninja speech. Let me explain to you what being a ninja really means. Iruka kept making most of the kids look terrified, and Naruto sneered. Still furious, he whispered to Sasuke, "Wow, this guy is laying it on hard." With an elbow to Naruto's side, Sasuke whispered, "Don't switch subjects, Naruto. I still can't believe that you would use a Kawarimi on me." Naruto laughed, finding it amusing nonetheless. "Hey, you know those Chunin wouldn't want to harm you. The heir of the Uchiha clan." The looks on their faces when they realized they had captured you. Iruka stopped talking as Naruto burst out laughing. All eyes turned to the 2 boys in the back as Iruka yelled, "Quiet down, Naruto. Ahem. As I was saying." Naruto tried to calm down and reduced his laughter to a low chuckle. When Sasuke reflected on it, he couldn't help but smile as well. The expressions on the Chunin faces were quite comical. They appeared to be almost. "Hey Naruto," Sasuke said, diverting his attention. "That Hyuga girl is staring at you like she wants a fight or something." With warning signals flashing through his mind, Naruto jerked his head around. In that instant, his gaze met Hinata Senju's dark brown eyes, and she was indeed gazing at him with a faint smile on her countenance. Iruka had already chastised Naruto for his loud greeting, so it took all of his self-control not to leap up and greet her with all of his might. Rather, he gestured softly for her to move closer to him, and she dutifully complied. "Hinata-heim," he exclaimed with excitement as he gripped her hand as she scooted over to sit next to him, seemingly disappearing like before. Looking at his first best friend, his first precious person who had brought light into his world, he was at a loss for words. Hinata was equally excited as she let Naruto hold onto her hand while he was engrossed in his intensely blue eyes, which were beaming with excitement. At last, they were reunited. But Sasuke appeared to be the only one who was a little offended by this rather affectionate fight. He leaned back in his chair and remained silent until he could confront Naruto about the situation after class. A few hours later, walking home together after their first half-day at the academy was Naruto and Sasuke. Sasuke was, to put it mildly, a little irritated. Both Naruto and he were Uchiha, raised to be superior and despised the Hyuga, not to make friends with them. Once they were out of sight, Sasuke turned to look at Naruto, who was currently lost in his own world. Finally, Sasuke snapped Naruto out of his lesson, asking, "Care to explain?" The blonde Uchiha gave Sasuke a puzzled glance for a while before realizing what he was talking about. He asked, referring to the girl he had been talking to the entire class, "Oh, you mean her?" Raising an eyebrow, Sasuke bided his time until Naruto continued. As though that clarified everything, Naruto exclaimed, "That was Hinata Senju." Unsatisfied, Sasuke scoffed. Glancing at Naruto as if he had an extra nose or something, he asked incredulously, I already know her name, idiot, I just... Wait. Did you say Hinata Senju? That girl is a Senju too? Sasuke was against Hinata, but why? After giving it some thought, Naruto realized that Sasuke was furious because the Uchiha detested the Senju and the Hyuga, and Hinata was one of them. Naruto began, trust me, raising his hands to reassure Sasuke. She's nothing like the stupid Hyuga, she's not even a Hyuga, she was just adopted by them. Sasuke didn't even seem to calm down, indicating that he didn't think well of that. Naruto forcefully swallowed and attempted to proceed. She's the girl I told you about before, we were in the orphanage together, and she was the only one nice to me, before we were adopted. Now that he knew why Naruto was befriending the girl, Sasuke crossed his arms. He'd been under the impression that Naruto had just struck up a conversation with her out of the blue. Your friend was a Hyuga Senju? Sasuke shook his head, asking incredulous. What a bummer, I was actually excited to meet her too. Happy that Sasuke had said that, Naruto enthusiastically nodded his head. You should still be. She's really nice, and funny too. You'll get along with her once you get to know her, and she likes training just as much as we do. Naruto's eyes widened as something clicked in his mind. Trying to convince Sasuke of his point of view, he exclaimed, That's it, she can be our other teammate, Sasuke. The Uchiha with the dark eyes was not amused at all. What are you talking about? We have a plan, remember? You'd be the smartest, I'd be the strongest. Having her would mess everything up, she's supposed to be strong too. The moment the realization finally dawned on Naruto, his eyes widened once more in shock. It would only be effective for the two of them. He hadn't considered the potential role for Hinata. Sasuke went on, she would have to be the worst student. She's a Senju, and a Hyuga. There's no way in hell she'd be the worst student. As Naruto considered this, his shoulders drooped. It wasn't good. They too had such a brilliant plan. Perhaps we could let her in on the scheme, rational Naruto proposed. Maybe she could be the worst on purpose and fit in. Sasuke gave a snort, obviously amused. I don't even know Hiyashi, but just by looking at the guy, what do you think he'd do to Hinata if he found out she was the worst in the class? With a loud groan, Naruto shook his head in annoyance. If Hiyashi discovered that Hinata was struggling so much, he would definitely decapitate her, and he could tell that from just one glance at the man. Seeking some sort of explanation, Naruto thought, maybe he's nicer to her. Maybe he'd let her do whatever she wants, because she's a Senju. Sasuke shrugged, showing little concern. He resumed his forward motion, making his way back toward the compound. Whatever. I still don't like the idea of having her on our team. Let's talk with Dad about it. With eagerness to learn from the head of the Uchiha, Naruto also nodded. Uchiha complex. When Fugaku heard the news, his eyes grew wide. Despite his casual report of the first day, he discovered this. He asked Naruto, wanting to make sure he understood, you're telling me that when you were in the orphanage, you befriended Hinata Senju, the Hinata Senju, who is now under the care of the Hyuga. While nodding a little slowly, Naruto did so. He repeated, his tone almost comical, and this is the girl who you want to be on your future Genin team? Again, Naruto nodded. Naruto was getting a little uneasy because Sasuke was giving him the same look that his father used to. You're friends with her out of all the girls in the world, Fugaku murmured, rubbing his forehead. Makoto, who was in the room, considered the situation carefully. Even though she wasn't a ninja, she could see the tension between the Senju and the Uchiha and the Hyuga. Naruto's eyes widened, surprised to hear her say, well, she said for the first time in the conversation, drawing attention from everyone. I don't see such a problem with it. I mean, the Uchiha and the Senju have always been at odds. Do we even know why? She said, reflecting deeply. Stillness. Looking up at Fugaku to see if he even knew the answer to the question, both Naruto and Sasuke did so. He said slowly, they're our rival clan, after giving it some thought. It's been that way since the beginning of our clan. Makoto gave a nod, seemingly demonstrating her point. See, and what's the point of continuing this rivalry? What do you benefit out of it? Fugaku pondered deeply, trying to ascertain the reason. His initial response had been, to prove our superiority, but since they had been eliminated, There was no longer any other Senju to even support that claim. I don't see a problem between a little friendliness between the two clans, Makoto said. At one point during the conversation, Itachi and Shisui had entered the room, but they had not yet made the decision to speak. Hinata is going to be the head of the Senju one day. Why wouldn't you want her to be friends with Naruto and Sasuke? In the future, our clans could be friends with each other. That would make us even stronger. Fugaku shook his head, clearly disliking the concept. Makoto-chan, he said, attempting to talk sense into his wife's ear. You don't understand, the Senju have always been enemies with us. Before this village was created, we fought against each other for money and power. If one country hired the Senju, the enemy country would hire us. We don't fit together. Makoto sighed, a little annoyed at Fugaku's intransigence. For whatever reason, Fugaku had taken over and it was no longer even an argument between her and Naruto. She exclaimed, raising everyone's eyebrows, don't be stupid. We're in the same village now, she's the only Senju left, now that Tsunade has abandoned us. If she were to befriend Naruto, the entire Senju would befriend the Uchiha. As fighting against each other wastes time, effort and money, why not be friendly? Fugaku complained, whispering something about honor and tradition, which made Makoto smile because she knew she had the upper hand. He scowled and turned away as she said, you're forgetting that this is Naruto we're talking about. How would you feel if your father wouldn't have allowed you to befriend me, an outside of the clan? She grinned down at Fugaku and said, exactly, we haven't even met this girl yet. She could be very nice. How about this? How about we invite her over to dinner one of these days, and get to know her a little better? If not for the sounds of Fugaku yelling as he fell off his chair, Sasuke's protesting gasps as his eyes widened, Itachi choking on his drink and having to spit it out all over the place, and Shisui's laughing at what he was seeing, the room would have been dead silent. Makoto gave Naruto a quick wink and a smile as he met his wide eyes. Following the initial shock, everyone stood up, and Fugaku gave his wife a strange look. He exclaimed, you're crazy. Expressing exactly what was on his mind, you're insane. Makoto scowled at Fugaku, frustrated that her demands weren't being met. She uttered, come on, Fugaku-kun, completely altering her voice. She approached Fugaku, putting her hands in prayer and giving him a pouty look. With her eyes fluttering, she begged, please? For Naruto. Fugaku let out a moan, detesting his current circumstance. He would feel bad about it for the next month or so if he neglected his wife now. He said, okay, let's invite her over for dinner. Shisui and Naruto were cheering. Itachi and Sasuke were expressing their disbelief. And Makoto was hugging her husband in gratitude as the room burst into chaos. What a fitting end. Naruto grinned to himself as he considered showing Hinata his family. He would have to inform her of this tomorrow. Later on that evening, Fugaku lay with his wife in bed and looked up at the ceiling. He had a lot on his mind, as he was thinking carefully about the issues that arose today. Makoto asked him, rolling around and whispering drowsily, what's wrong, honey? With a sigh, Fugaku crossed his arms over his head. Nothing's wrong, I'm just thinking about Naruto and this Senju girl who he likes. She twisted around to face the other way and rested her head on her hand. Oh, and what's wrong with that? Once more, nothing, he answered, albeit a little slowly. It's just, this is a big thing, for our clan. The Uchiha and Senju have historically been enemies, would this be best for us? Makoto asked, laughing to herself, for us? For God's sake, Fugaku. He just wants to be her friend. It's not like he's signing a peace treaty or anything, what's wrong with friendship? Fugaku let out another sigh. You're right, it's not like they're going to get married or something, right? Makoto gave Fugaku a mischievous smile and shrugged. Maybe they will. Fugaku almost choked, making Makoto chuckle to herself. Why did Uchiha despise the Senju so much? It nearly made sense. I don't think you've thought about it like this, Makoto said. When Hinata grows up with the Hyuga, what do you think they'll make her do? They're going to marry her to one of their own. That way, they will have control over all of the Senju clan and merge bloodlines as well. But if Naruto marries Hinata, then the Uchiha get the Senju bloodline limit, and the Uchiha control the Senju while the Hyuga don't. Fugaku stopped pretending to gag and became motionless while considering this. Why hadn't he considered it in that way before? If they combined the Senju, the Hyuga would become even more formidable, possibly even more so than the Uchiha. They would undoubtedly have greater sway. Nevertheless, if the Uchiha ruled the Senju. Makoto laughed and said, "I'm joking, Fugaku. They're just kids, and marriage is about love, not control and power." Fugaku gave a slight nod, but not too slowly. A smile started to appear on his face. Maybe he would be in favor of Naruto and Hinata's relationship. The advantages seemed too good to refuse. Imagine Hiyoshi's reaction if Hinata wed Uchiha. "Yes, dear. I understand completely." Afterwards, Naruto pondered over everything that had transpired in a single day while sitting in his room at Shisui's residence. He'd been able to visit the academy and he'd seen Hinata too. Moreover, his father had granted him permission to invite Hinata over for dinner. With a contented sigh, he dropped onto his bed and folded his arms over his head. He grinned widely when he heard Shisui in the kitchen singing to himself. After he joined this amazing clan, everything was going smoothly for him. He was surrounded by more priceless family members than he could count on one hand. In addition to his mother and father, he had 3 brothers and Hinata Haim. His expression finally darkened into a frown as he continued to consider Hinata. He had a plan. Sasuke was to be the class leader and he was to receive the highest grades possible. But Hinata could not be the lowest. Hiyoshi wouldn't even be interested in finding out what he would do. "There's another thing you could do." Wondering why he thought that, Naruto inclined his head slightly. Did he have any other options? Indeed. Let Hinata be the smartest student in the class while you could be the worst. Naruto's eyebrows grew wide at the thoughtless idea. That might work, wouldn't it? It would. Hinata would receive better treatment from Hiyoshi if she were to excel in one area and remain at the top of the class, but Fugaku is much more accepting of you. Naruto nodded, acknowledging in part what he was thinking. He would fulfill his promise to Sasuke and Hinata. He'd be the Dobi, the last person standing. It would be worthwhile, though. Yes, in fact. If a group of genin were all proficient in Dujutsu, you would be one step ahead of everyone else. Naruto gave a headshake. Why would he consider that at all? No, Naruto reflected, perplexed. Hinata is a senju, not a Dujutsu practitioner. Right. My error. Very well. A team consisting of 2 senju and 2 dujutsu. Yes, that made more sense, Naruto nodded. Hold on a minute, nor did he possess a Sharingan. Yes, that is also true. Again, a team consisting of 1 senju, 1 Sharingan, and someone much, much greater. Naruto gave a headshake. He wasn't that special, he shouldn't be acting arrogant. You ought not to be so modest. You possess far more than others do. And you have the power to mold the future. You will, I promise you, change the course of events. However, for better or worse. For the better, correct? Why, though, would he alter the future? I apologize. I was mistaken once more. You're the world's future. Everything hinges on you. What made him think this way? Was he going insane? It seemed like he was conversing with someone else inside his head. You are not, that's for sure. All you need to do is wait. The right moment will arrive. Every villager who has ever disrespected you, no, disrespected us, will eventually come to regret it. When they fully perceive our power. Us? He had a lot going on today. Perhaps he just needed some rest. Since when did he have 2 personalities? He was sorely in need of sleep. Now go relax, young one. You know what, tomorrow is going to be a big day for you. 18-year-old Amikage Yahiko rose from his throne and strode across the small room with ease. He brushed aside the curtain that concealed the entrance and exit as soon as he got to the end. The moment he stepped outside, the strong wind blew his orange hair to the side, requiring him to comb it out. He continued walking, ignoring the rain and wind, until he reached the edge of his metal structure. Yahiko's base now comprised a massive metal tower that overlooked the entirety of AIM and was visible from every corner of the village. And from this vantage point, the entire village was in front of him. The village was still experiencing a lot of rain, with ominous thunderstorm clouds looming overhead. However, Yahiko could still feel Konan behind him despite all of the noise, including that of the city below them. Konan sighed contentedly as she put her arms around Yahiko's waist from behind and embraced him. She didn't need to say anything. The two were dressed alike. in one-piece ensembles with a red line running down the center of them and dark robes with high collars. After a while, Yahiko said, "I'm so close," his Rinnegan eyes fixed on the storm clouds. "I can feel it, the peace, Conan. I can feel the peace which will fall upon the world. I've already helped this country. AIM is no longer a battleground of slaughter. I am the only leader, and there is no war. There are orphanages and schools. There are no more starving children on the streets, with no food." Conan agreed with Yahiko and nodded. She turned him around so she could look him in the eyes and said, "You really did," with joy. Observing that she had placed a paper flower in her hair, he grinned at her. "You really brought peace to AIM, but the world is so big, how can you imagine to bring peace to all?" Yahiko gave Conan a very serious look as if to reassure her that he was not kidding at all. "My parents gave me the strongest power in the world, which I will use to spread my religion and force people to follow it. With my eyes and my chakra, I can bring peace to the world just as the sage did before me. The world in which we live is corrupt and evil. Evil council members rule over villages, eradicating their own clans in order to hold onto power. Like I control this village, I will have to rule every single one. And I'll have to use force to accomplish it because there will be people who are opposed to peace and who were raised in blood. I'll have to murder them, but only to get a proposal. Because there won't be any more senseless bloodshed and the world will soon be freed from the stain of war. I'll need a group." Yahiko went on, "I cannot fully understand each village unless I have a member of each one from in my group." Conan inquired, wanting to know what Yahiko had planned. "You want to take one person from each village?" They would discuss this all the time, of course, but this was the first time he brought up this particular passage. Yahiko gave a nod and carried on. "Yes, basically. 1 or 2 from whatever village I can recruit from. I'll need power, I'll have information on each village then, and I will know what it takes to overpower them. A group of powerful ninja, those who will leave their village by choice, perhaps I will even use those cast away from the village. And with that power, I will be able to take over each village, and become the leader of all, just like with AIM. And then, when all are under my command, the world will truly be in peace." Yahiko scowled in confusion as Conan laughed at the end. She said, "Those are big plans," which made him shrug. "You'd have to be a god to have power over all the village and all these powerful people." Yahiko acknowledged this by nodding. "With my power, I am a god among blind fools." This time, Conan sighed and comforted Yahiko with another hug. He gave her a hug back and she said, "Remember all those years ago?" She joked playfully. "Knowing that she would never be able to control the weather, you said that when you became god, you would have the power to stop all of this rain. Can you do that yet?" Yahiko released Conan and spun away, staring up at the heavens. She let out a gasp, unsure of his next move. Did he really think she was serious when she said that? With a sudden clap of his hands, he poured all of his chakra into his seal. His hair started to fly up as a result of the intense chakra use, forcing Conan to step back and use her hands to protect herself from the overwhelming power in front of her. Then, with power blazing in his Rinnegan eyes, Yahiko raised his hands to the sky. Nothing happened for a few moments, then all of a sudden the rain started to lessen. Holding out her hand, Conan felt less and less raindrops land on it, and she gasped. She was left speechless when the rain finally stopped altogether, 10 seconds later. As the clouds parted, the miracle continued until all of a sudden, one light beam emerged from the shadowy heavens and shone down on Yahiko. Conan collapsed backward at this point, gazing in amazement at what she was witnessing. Because of the ray of heavenly light that fell upon him, he truly was a god. It seemed that everyone in the village below started to notice this as well, because large groups of people had gathered at the foot of the structure, staring up at their leader in utter amazement. The majority of people had never seen the rain stop, so this was the first time in their lives that it had. They also saw Yahiko shine a light, indicating that she was the one halting the rain. The village went silent in astonishment as residents began to rush out of their homes and pause what they were doing to gawk at the cessation of the rain. Children pointed in dismay to the streak of light that illuminated the Amikaja atop his tower, his hands raised to the heavens, as they fled their alleyways. The light eventually spread, and the village was bathed in light as all of the clouds parted. The village immediately burst into cheers and applause, celebrating their leader's success. With panting heavily, Yahiko turned and walked back to Conan, whose stunned eyes remained open. He dropped to his knees in front of her, bringing himself up to her eye level. Yes, Conan. I can even stop the rain, for you. After that, he gave her a final embrace and pressed his lips to hers. She leaned forward to give him a deeper kiss as she obediently accepted his approach. Now that the rain had temporarily stopped, the village was at peace, and she was with Yahiko, her true love and the only other precious person she had left in the world. The world was ideal for her. The following morning at Sasuke's house, Naruto sat with him while they ate breakfast. In order to have dinner together before heading out for their first full day at the academy, he had strolled over with Shisui. Most of the meal was spent in silence, and Naruto sensed that Sasuke was still a little bit miffed about the whole Hinata situation. Nevertheless, it provided him with some time to reflect on the peculiar discussion he'd had with himself the previous evening and consider what he needed to say to everyone else. Naruto said, I have a new plan, which made Shisui and Itachi and everyone else stare at him curiously. One team has to have the overall best, the smartest, and the weakest. Hinata can't be the weakest. Hiyashi wouldn't allow it. He's too mean. But she can still be the smartest. They all gave him a mildly shocked look when he made this statement. Sasuke, you can still be the strongest too. I'll be the weakest. Hinata will be the smartest, and I'll be the weakest. That way we can still all be on the same team. Fugaku widened his eyes at this remark. Even though Naruto wasn't his biological son, he still had his best interests at heart. For some reason, he could see a firm resolve in Naruto's eyes as he cautioned, Naruto, think about this carefully. Would you really be the worst, for this one girl? Naruto instinctively nodded his head. Yes, I would, Dad, he uttered, softening Fugaku's eyes. This girl is special. She was the first one to be nice to me. When everyone else would always hurt me and make me cry, she was the only one to show me kindness. I would do anything for her. Again, silence. Naruto said something like that, so it was impossible for anyone else to say no to him. Excellent, Fugaku remarked, letting out a deep breath. Makoto was grinning at him when he turned to look at her. He glanced over at Itachi as well, who gave him a cold shoulder. He turned to face Shisui, who was smiling too. I'll support you, being dead last in the class. But you still have to graduate. Naruto gave an animated nod. He exclaimed, great, as he leapt from the table and rushed to embrace his father. Trust me, guys. You'll really like her. She's awesome. Fugaku laughed at the boy's enthusiasm, thinking that this choice was best for him and that Naruto really was similar to his real father in many ways. You handled them expertly, little one. When the ideas came back to Naruto, he winced. He played them not at all. He just revealed to them his real feelings. Yes, but you still completed the task. Excellent work. With a shrug, Naruto grinned at his relatives. Excellent work. Afterwards, training grounds right now, Shisui and Itachi were in the woods, setting up their own personal training area. While they practiced together, the two talked about their thoughts. After all, they had been best friends for their entire lives. Shisui said, methodically punching the wooden dummy, this is so cool. With a curious expression on his face, Itachi lowered his shuriken, presumably assuming Shisui wasn't referring to the dummy. He finally asked, what, when Shisui would not go on. Naruto and Sasuke's plan, he retorted, quickly emerging behind the dummy and punching it once more. They're so proud of them. They're only in their first year, and they already have plans to beat the system, he exclaimed, feigning tears in his eyes. Itachi laughed and nodded in agreement. Yeah, I guess they are. This girl, this is the one that he went out on the walk with when we were spying on Naruto, remember? He inquired. Shisui gave a nod. How could I forget? That's when Naruto first revealed Madara's powers. Interesting how Madara revealed himself at that time. Do you ever wonder what Madara is doing inside of Naruto anyway? Or the Kyuubi, for that matter. I mean, do they talk to each other or something? Itachi shrugged, unsure of what to say. I don't focus on things like that. I have more important things to worry about. Shisui snorted. Yeah right. You're still just an Anbu. I'm going to be a full Jonin soon. I'll get all the ladies. Itachi was the one to scoff now, obviously finding that statement funny. Shisui became agitated at Itachi's response right away. Itachi pushed Shisui's buttons by saying, Even with genjutsu, you couldn't get a girl to like you. Not that you're looking for any girls. You've had your eyes on that one peasant girl ever since you were like 5. Shisui's cheeks flushed unusually red, quite nicely, given that this was his Sharingan activation. Don't bring that up. You're one to talk. You haven't even talked with that one Uchiha girl who you have your eyes set on. Once more, Itachi shrugged and shook his head, attempting to regulate his feelings. I could if I wanted to. Most of the time I'm turning down all the other girls who are clinging onto my feet. Itachi then started to move away, leaving Shisui to look at him curiously. Unaware of Itachi's plans, he asked, "Hey, where are you going?" Itachi turned around without flinching. "Oh, I'm just going to stop by a certain ramen bar, and perhaps I'll use my charms to sway a certain peasant girl who works there." He then waved a wink at Shisui before vanishing into thin air. Shisui vanished too, hurrying to the ramen bar in less than a second. Academy. Like the day before, Naruto, Sasuke, and Hinata were seated in the rear of the classroom. Even though Sasuke was aware that Hinata was special, he still had to roll his eyes and sigh when Naruto turned to speak with her. With a shake of her head in shock, Hinata exclaimed, "I can't believe you're a Uchiha. I'm so happy that you were finally adopted. I was always worried that you would never be adopted and that." She seemed to be choking on her words, so Naruto had to pick up where she left off. "Yeah, the Uchiha are awesome. They're really nice, and they're like my giant family now. I met Sasuke, Itachi, Shisui, and I basically have a mom and dad now too." Hinata grinned and nodded, but on the inside she was unable to control a small jealousy ember. She wished for Naruto's best interests, but why wasn't she able to adopt a Uchiha family of her own? Wondering how she was doing, Naruto said, "Well, how are the Hyuga?" Her obvious hesitation caught his attention right away, and he furrowed his brows in perplexity. "Well, they're all right," claimed Hinata. That wasn't a lie, though. The branch family was pleasant, as were Neji and Hizashi. Naruto scowled as he cast a worried glance at Hinata. Was she truly okay? Yes, exactly. Given the reputation of the Hyuga main branch for being icy and cruel, I wouldn't be shocked if she was covered in bruises. Hinata gasped in mild surprise as Naruto snatched her arms at that very moment. He had to push up the sleeves of her long-sleeved dress in order to look at her arms. As soon as he saw the multiple bruises on both of her arms, a sign that she had been struck hard, his eyes widened in shock. He cautiously asked, peering into her eyes to make sure she wasn't lying, "What are these from?" She stammered as she turned her back on his piercing glaze. "Anyo, they're just bruises from when I train. I hit the wooden dummies too hard, that's all." Hee. Forearms are not used by Juken. They painfully close chakras by jabbing at specific points. You would probably get a bruise from an opponent's blow if it struck you hard enough, just the same size as hers. She widened her eyes in shock as Naruto whispered to her, "These are Juken bruises." How come he knew with such ease? "The Hyuga have always irked me. I would never use cruel training methods to injure any Uchiha. I'm more concerned with their development so that they will eventually support my clan rather than despise it. Personally, I would never split the clan into 2 factions. It's just not my style." Naruto agreed with his thoughts and nodded. He swore, furious at the way the Hyuga handled Hinata. He wished she could be with him, with the Uchiha. More, in this manner, Hiyashi would be prevented from harming her inadvertently. Whispering, "Hinata Heim," he turned back to face Hinata. Though he saw a slight red glow on her cheeks, he didn't give it much attention. "If the Hyuga are ever training you too hard, you know that you can always run away to the Uchiha, to me. Promise me you won't let them hurt you." Hinata was taken aback by the outpouring of compassion and generosity she heard in such a brief and quiet whisper, and the words had a profound effect on her. Naruto. He genuinely had feelings for her. All right, Naruto-kun," she answered, albeit a little slowly. With a sigh, Naruto turned back to face front, as he should have been doing. He cast a quick glance at Sasuke, who was obviously very bored and was reclining in his chair. To comprehend what was happening, he trained his ears to hear what the teacher, Iruka, had to say. Iruka concluded, hoping that everyone was listening, "So, basically, to sum up what I've been saying, we won't be learning any tough ninjutsu or anything, but the necessities of what every ninja needs to know. But, before I can do that, I need to assess the current talent level of the class, and to do that, we'll have to go outside. Follow me, class. After following Haruka into a training area behind the school, Naruto stood outside with Sasuke and Hinata standing next to him. Alright, to start us off, can anyone tell the class what a jutsu is? When Naruto realized what was happening, his eyes grew wide. This was the first step. Now was the moment to put his plan into action. Hinata needed to be declared the class' smartest person. In order to avoid making contact with the teacher, Hinata held her hands formally in front of her while glancing at the ground. She was reluctant to speak at this moment because she would embarrass the Hyuga if she stammered or spoke incorrectly. But when Naruto gave her a gentle prod in the side and motioned with his head for her to respond, it turned her off. She raised her hand, confused but not wanting to let Naruto down. Glad that someone had raised their hand, Haruka called out to Hinata, "Yes, do you know the answer?" In fact, a number of children did, among them an odd girl with pink hair who was tumbling around in front of him. "Hi!" Hinata exclaimed, attempting to project her feeble voice. Jutsu is an art that ninja use, either to battle or for other reasons. Jutsu utilizes chakra, and a certain and specific amount is used to manifest the correct jutsu, often assisted by hand seals. Jutsu can be classified into 3 basic forms: ninjutsu, genjutsu, and taijutsu, though there are many other forms that it can be put under, like hiden jutsu, or kenjutsu. Haruka gave a nod, obviously impressed. This young student gave a textbook response, which surprised him. She was intelligent. The pink-haired girl in front of him obviously wanted to respond, but he ignored her envious and whiny looks and moved on. Haruka exclaimed, "Very good, Hinata," which made Naruto proudly smile at her and blush a little. "You got it perfectly. Jutsu requires chakra, an energy that comes from within us. It's classified under many different forms, the most basic being ninjutsu, genjutsu, and taijutsu. I don't really expect any of you to know this, but there are several major clans in the class. Does anyone here know any type of ninjutsu?" With a nod, Naruto closed his eyes. This was the beginning of his plan. He had to be the worst student in the class, so he wouldn't raise his hand. "Excellent. How about some examples from you guys?" he said, glancing around at the small number of hands that were being raised. "Shikamaru, what ninjutsu do you know?" Shikamaru sighed, feeling remorseful for having raised his hand. He raised it again, but why? He simply believed that if the teacher found out he already knew some jutsu, he might be able to skip some lessons in the future. He didn't think the guy would ask for examples. He said, "How troublesome," as he made his way cautiously to the front of the group. He spoke up once more after gaining everyone's attention. Grinning to himself, he called out, "I'll need a volunteer." Ino. This was a good way to exact revenge on Ino, who was a childhood friend of his. With trepidation, the blonde girl approached the front of the group. Knowing that Shikamaru was more intelligent than he appeared, she admonished, "You better not try anything stupid with me, you hear?" The indolent boy shrugged, not really giving a damn about her opinion. He sighed and brought his chakra into focus when she was in front. He created a rat seal and inserted his chakra into it to execute the Kagemane no Jutsu, the foundational form of his family's hiden jutsu. His shadow appeared beneath him and suddenly spread out across the ground, shocking the students with their sudden movements. With a yell, Ino attempted to leap over it, but he wasn't even focused on her. To the dismay of the students, she touched the shadow, but nothing happened. The shadow technique worked well, Shikamaru sighed. Haruka, who was fully aware of the method, gave a nod of approval. But when they saw that Ino was still standing there, unharmed, the students were not impressed. Just as they were about to make fun of him, Ino let out a frustrated cry. She cried out, "Hey, let me go, meanie," and attempted to move, but to no avail. With a smile, Shikamaru enjoyed annoying her. The class finally saw what the jutsu accomplished when he waved his right hand and Ino waved hers at the same time. The class burst out laughing as Shikamaru suddenly began to dance, much to Ino's dismay as she was made to follow suit. He pranced around, mimicking Ino's strange arm gestures. Haruka chastised, "That's enough," now, in an attempt to quiet the class. Shikamaru regretted allowing his shadow to follow him back, and he walked back to the group, receiving several high fives from the boys. Haruka cleared his throat when there was silence in the class. Ahem. Well, how about another example? Sasuke, can you show the class any jutsu you know? With confidence that he would demonstrate his superiority, Sasuke nodded. He flew through his favorite hand seals without waiting for approval, yelling out, Kaden. Gokakyu no Jutsu. He blew out a big ball of fire that shot parallel to the ground while holding his hand to his mouth. It finally erupted into flames when it made contact with a wooden dummy. Similarly, the class erupted in cheers and applause, greatly impressed by the jutsu. Iruka was equally impressed. After all, he was a Uchiha, a person with strong chakra who was skilled in fire techniques. Still, that was a C-ranked jutsu, and a child of his age shouldn't be able to execute it. Sasuke also displayed the Uchiha symbol on his back, indicating his mastery of the jutsu. However, Naruto did the same, and when Iruka asked if he knew any ninjutsu, Naruto had not raised his hand. Hold on. Naruto. Iruka exclaimed, glancing at the conceited-looking blonde who was lost in thought. After impressing the class, everyone began to believe that Sasuke was the greatest. The strategy was succeeding. But his head snapped to reality and jolted him out of his reverie when he heard Iruka call out his name. He asked, wanting some examples, you used a kawarimi before. The Chunin told us, would you care to perform that one more time for the class? Naruto wore the seal, so he had to be proficient in ninjutsu? With a frown, Naruto saw the mixed reactions of the students. Iruka knew he could pull off a kawarimi, sokuso. Some were expecting a lot from him after seeing the Uchiha symbol on his back, while others were whispering about his past. Trying to skirt this, Naruto finally said, I'd rather not. Iruka grew irritated and lifted an eyebrow at Naruto. Besides, I think we've seen enough examples of ninjutsu. Iruka sighed, but she didn't want to coerce a pupil into doing anything against his will. Very well. Class, let's return to the room now and begin our studies. Relieved that he wouldn't have to impress the class, Naruto sighed too. Though he dismissed Hinata's worried glance, he was aware of it. He needed to give her an explanation of his strategy. He would probably carry it out at lunch. The three of them were a little put off by Iruka's opening lesson as they sat down to lunch together at a table. All he discussed was basic information that they were all already aware of, such as the identity of the Hokage, ninja ranks, kunai, and other such topics. Naruto was actually taken aback by how few kids actually knew some of this information. When some students didn't even know what a kunai was, how was he supposed to be the worst? It was going to be difficult. Speaking of which, he turned to face Hinata, who was eating silently to his right, giving him the occasional sidelong glance. Sitting across from them, wearing a sullen expression, was Sasuke. He let out a sigh, knowing that Sasuke would find it difficult to accept Hinata in the near future and that it might take some time. Naruto called out to her, Hinata Haim, and she turned to face him. She used to get annoyed when Naruto referred to her as a princess, but now strangely, she kind of liked it. I have to tell you about our plan. The plan Sasuke and I have. Her head cocked in confusion. She wondered what plan the Uchiha boy and Naruto could have together, or if it was just a practical joke. Hinata nodded in agreement as Naruto questioned, you know that we'll be put onto a genin team when we graduate from the academy? Hi, she answered, having previously studied this. A genin team consists of 2 boys and a girl, with an assigned Jonin sensei, and... Exactly, Naruto cut in, omitting that entire section. Well, Sasuke and I were planning to be on the same genin team when we graduated, and I want you to be on that team as well. Hinata noticed a slight heat wave return to her cheeks, an annoyance that had started to happen to her whenever she was around Naruto these days. Why was it happening now when it hadn't happened when she was younger? Was it because, having spent time with the Hyuga, his thoughtfulness was now more valued? She stammered a little, Naruto-kun, I would really like that. Naruto nodded, happy she found it enjoyable. But it appeared he was the only one. Sasuke, across the table, was obviously not amused. He said, I like that Naruto-kun, in a girly, mocking voice, making Hinata's forehead vain with annoyance. With a displeased tone, Sasuke questioned, how old are you? 3. When Hinata turned to face her rival, Uchiha, her shyness vanished. How dare you talk to me like that? She exclaimed, giving the Uchiha heir a hard time. I am a baby, Sasuke yawned and concluded for her. Naruto, Are you sure this girl even has potential? I mean, she seems to have difficulty finishing a sentence without stutters. Naruto let out a sigh and hoped that Sasuke and Hinata would stop fighting. How come they couldn't just be pals? Without faltering, Hinata exclaimed, I'm positive I can beat you. Your fireball was impressive, but could you make those hand seals when you can't even move your arms? Sasuke gave the raucous Senju a raised eyebrow. Was that a challenge? He asked, amused and almost menacing. You fail to understand that you aren't in the same league as me and Naruto. Rising from the table, Hinata's face flushed red again, but this time with rage. She growled, what you mouth, Uchiha, with genuine anger. Never one to be outdone by this girl, Sasuke got to his feet as well. His eyes glaring at Hinata, he hissed, or what, Senju? Naruto began to perspire, fearing that Hinata and Sasuke would fight, and he could swear that a bolt of electricity was approaching their eyes. He pulled Hinata down beside him once more and exclaimed, relax, relax. But Sasuke gathered his belongings and would not sit. I'm sorry Naruto, but I refuse to sit at the same table as an arrogant Senju like her. After discarding the trash, he turned to leave and went back inside the building. Shaking his head, Naruto sighed. If they couldn't even eat lunch, how were they supposed to form a team? Exclaimed an irate Hinata, that boy. Once more, Naruto chastised, Hinata, relax. Sasuke has to get used to the fact that you're a Senju, and a Hyuga. We don't really like each other, you know that right? With a nod, Hinata rested on her arms. She said, her mind already made up, I certainly don't like him. Naruto attempted to explain this to Hinata by saying, but you have to. He's going to be our teammate, you have to listen to our plan. Turning to face him, she waited for him to elaborate. With a clear throat, he prepared to reveal his top-secret concept. He mutely said, all right, so that no one else would hear him. Leaning forward, Hinata realized how important this was. There's always one team that remains the same, though, because every year when the students graduate to become genin, the teams that are formed are typically formed based on each student's unique talents. The smartest, worst, and best students are always grouped together on the same team. When he said this, Hinata's eyes grew wide because she had no idea that Sasuke and I had once been the strongest and smartest. Nah. With fear in her eyes, Hinata worriedly grasped Naruto's arm, saying, you can't. I can't be the worst. Indeed, Hiyashi would. I understand, Naruto remarked, attempting to soothe her once more. I considered that, so I've adjusted the plans. Sasuke will be the overall best, and I will be the worst. That means... Hinata's eyes widened once more. Yes. You must possess the highest level of intelligence. Hinata considered the future with a worried expression on her face. What if I'm not the smartest? You could be, but I'm not sure I can be that smart. I have read every book you have ever read in your previous domain, but what if? You can do it, Hinata-heim. Naruto smiled and grasped her hand, effectively silencing her as well. You can, I'm sure of it. I could also teach you anything if you ever needed assistance with it. Gazing up into Naruto's deep blue eyes, Hinata inhaled deeply and lost herself in his gaze, feeling safely and securely wrapped up. Okay, she at last said, her confidence growing. I can do it, I'm going to be the best. Naruto grinned, hugged her, and opened her eyes wide 3 times in a row. Magical, Hinata, you are amazing. The last time Hinata had been hugged was so long ago, so right, that she clung to Naruto for as long as she could, prolonging the peaceful moment. Naruto grinned, allowing her to do so. Hinata lost herself in Naruto's embrace as her thoughts wandered to far-off places. It is disgusting to witness a Uchiha and a Senju coexisting in such harmony. Naruto disagreed with his thoughts by mentally shaking his head. No, it feels right, he thought to himself, enjoying the sensation. For now, it's your decision. Just watch that your emotions don't interfere with your actual plan. Naruto was clueless as to the meaning of that. What actual strategy? Though you might not realize it yet, soon, but soon, everything will become clear to you, Madara said in Naruto's mind, glowering wickedly as he fiddled with a black flame between his fingertip tips. The Kyuubi said, you're arrogant, in the background, making Madara snort angrily. Perhaps you can tolerate a weak vessel, but not me. I failed to destroy Konoha while I was among the mortal. I thought having you would be enough power to destroy Konoha, but it was not. Somehow, each time I attacked Konoha, there would always be some way that it survived, by the slightest margins, but it would survive once again. So the strongest man alive couldn't destroy a village, even with the strongest Biju. The Kyuubi laughed. With a sly grin, Madara shrugged. That was all in the past. But, I am still alive. And I haven't yet failed. I can still destroy Konoha. The Kyuubi growled, "You forget the seal," and said as much. "There is no escape for us. There is no way for you to destroy Konoha. We will be contained within Naruto until death." With a chuckle, Madara turned to face the Kyuubi. "You're correct. For the time being, there is no way out. However, that doesn't mean I can't destroy Konoha. I can and I will, using Naruto. Naruto possesses what I could never have. His chakra is combining with mine and the Kyuubi's. He possesses all of my power, and I will use Naruto to destroy him. It's going to be so simple. I know little of human ways. But I know that our host will not willingly destroy the village that he seems to care for," the Kyuubi said, laughing at this. Madara agreed with the Kyuubi and nodded, saying, "That's true, and I wouldn't want it any other way. It is much too late for the Uchiha. They have long since destroyed themselves. Their days are numbered. They are an extinct people. Before Konoha destroys them, it is only a matter of time. They disregarded my warnings because they were foolish. I could see how corrupt Konoha had become, and they were self-centered bastards. They recognized our true power and our potential, and because of this, they pushed us further and further away from authority, isolating us. No one else saw this, except for me. I tried to inform the Uchiha about what the council intended to do to us, but they didn't believe me. I had to flee before it was too late, trying to destroy Konoha and save the Uchiha. I even attempted to save the Senju, but they disregarded my advice as well. The Uchiha went dormant after I left Konoha, and the Senju started to gain power. Too much for the council to handle. The Hokage was too blind to see it coming as the council started to treat the Senju the same way, pushing them further away from authority. And then it took place. It was too late for the Senju, and now they aren't alive to tell the tale. I'm almost certain the council will try to pull the same thing with the Uchiha as well. I can see a massacre. But I can save Naruto from it, and when he sees all of the blood, and when he sees his dead family before him, then he will willingly help me destroy Konoha. After hearing about Madara's plans, the Kyuubi declared, "Mankind is corrupt and disgusting. They plot against each other and kill each other without hesitation. No other creature would do this but a human." Madara gave the Kyuubi a nod of agreement. Perhaps that will change, when I, stand at the top of the world." Naruto couldn't help but have the weirdest dreams that night, dreams of death, dreams of failure, and dreams of success. He was unable to sleep soundly and tossed and turned repeatedly in his bed. He had no idea that a dark, evil chakra was fusing with his own inside his body, uncontrollably, strengthening him every night and increasing his power. The thought of his plans succeeding was the only thing that occasionally kept him awake. He looked forward to the day when all of his plans would come to pass and he would be genuinely happy. After a week with a sigh, Naruto stayed behind while Sasuke made his way back to the Uchiha compound. He had informed Sasuke that he would need to stay after class to speak with Hinata. His parents had previously given him permission to invite Hinata over for dinner, but it turned out to be surprisingly difficult. It was difficult for him to ask because he knew it would be difficult for her. Taking a deep breath, he got his nerves back. He had to ask directly, and hope that she would even think about it. He could only speculate as to what Hiashi might do. "No, you are already aware of his plans. There's still an opportunity. Maybe Hinata could persuade him to. Give up dreaming and ask her right away. It's time for you to begin Shisui's training." Naruto agreed with his inner thoughts and shrugged. Before it was too late, he only needed to ask her. He looked around and saw her standing patiently next to the tree. The one with the one swing. Nearby. He was already aware that before they could go back to the Hyuga manor, Neji, basically her bodyguard, had to come get her. With a smile on his face, he shook his head. He had to make sure Hinata believed he was confident despite his own nervousness. After all, she looked at him when he walked over there, and for some reason, that made her straighten up. "Hey, Hinata-heim," he exclaimed, giving her a joyful wave. Sensing his aura descend upon him, She smiled and eased up a bit. Do you have a second? When he finally got to her, she nodded excitedly. She grinned back at him and said, Sure, Naruto-kun. Satisfied that she was prepared to listen, Naruto nodded. Since there wasn't really a nice way to bring this up, he might as well say it straight out. Hinata, I was wondering, he said, his confidence trembling just a little. Whatever that might have been, Hinata managed to catch it, and the smile vanished. When Hinata's face fell, horror shining in her eyes, Naruto stopped, saying, Would you like to come over to my house for dinner tonight? My parents are cool with it, he added rapidly. And they invited you as well. We really would enjoy for you come over. My dad is the clan head after all, and he would be pleased to get to know you, my future teammate, more. Hinata pondered over her response, her eyes darting as she tried to picture the potential, no, the inevitable, future. She would definitely be thrilled to have dinner with Naruto. Sasuke, not so much, but Naruto. However, Hiashi would sooner die than allow her to join Naruto for dinner. She stammered out, and Naruto, attempting to find a way to tell him that the concept was absurd. I would love to, but... Naruto cut her off, grinning broadly. Great, I knew you would want to. This is going to be sweet. You can meet Shisui and Itachi, and you can. Now Hinata cut him off, saying, and Naruto, which made him stop. I know that this is a good time to introduce me to your parents, but I don't think that. Naruto said, I'm sorry, starting a trend. I didn't fully explain myself. My parents would like you to come, but more importantly, I would like you to come. Hinata-hime. I know that it's going to be hard to ask Hiashi to do this, but can you try? I know you can. Hinata was at a loss on how to respond to Naruto's beseeching expression. She would have to give it her all for Naruto-kun. She would force Hiashi to let her go, no matter how difficult it would be. Finally, she said, All right, Naruto-kun. I'll ask Hiashi-sama, but I don't know if he will. With a loud, woohoo, Naruto raised his fist in the air. That's awesome, I really did know you would do it. Hinata grinned at Naruto, her cheeks taking on a vibrant shade of red. She was so relieved to be free of the gray Hyuga compound she had been imprisoned in for so long when he smiled at her. A third member arrived, sneaking up on Naruto from behind, but neither of them noticed since they were too absorbed in the moment. What's this excitement about? Naruto recoiled and spun around quickly, startled to see Neji Hyuga, who had just started talking. Surprisingly, Neji wasn't the same Hyuga Naruto had grown accustomed to. He was not as cold as Hiashi, but he was also not as happy as the Uchiha, like Shisui. But there was something a little unsettling about the boy. Naruto possessed remarkable talent considering his age. He was proficient in taijutsu, had a respectable kawarimi, and knew several fire jutsu. But his intelligence surpassed all of that. Despite all of that, though, he felt a little intimidated by Neji, as if he knew the Hyuga child was unquestionably stronger than him. In Hinata's stead, Naruto answered, Nothing really. I just wanted to talk with Hinata-hime for a little bit. But, I'm done now, so I guess I'm gonna head back home. See ya, Hinata-hime. When Naruto said, Hime, Neji would tremble, but Naruto didn't notice. He ignored it, and after Hinata bid him farewell in a low voice, he departed. Neji turned to Hinata after Naruto had vanished from view, her expression questioning but noticeably more tender. She let out a sigh and decided it would be better to inform Neji rather than Hiashi. Afterwards, Uchiha Complex dinner time was almost here by the time Naruto returned to the compound. Nevertheless, Naruto went directly to Shisui's house because Shisui had instructed him to meet him there after he was finished. Naruto was taken aback when, before he could even approach the door, Shisui suddenly materialized in front of him. With a happy cry, Yo, Naruto o Tuto, Shisui leaned back against the door. You finished with the academy already? Great, cause it's time I get to training you. Grinning, Naruto relished the thought of working out with his elder brother. He would grow extremely strong, but did he really need it at this time? I'm not sure, Ni-chan, he feigned as he calmly put his hands behind his head. I'm supposed to be dead last in my class. Shisui urged, it's going to be cool, I promise. Naruto didn't seem to be persuaded yet. I don't know, you're kinda lame, after all. Maybe I should get Itachi to train me. Shisui's face fell flat when his rival was mentioned, but he bounced back quickly. Trust me, Naruto, I'm much, much cooler than Itachi. In fact, I'm faster, and I can use hypnosis better than he can. Raising his eyebrows, Naruto realized he had never heard the second part before. Hypnosis, don't you mean genjutsu? No, Shisui replied, happy to have Naruto captivated. There's a difference. Genjutsu is a type of hypnosis, but I can do plain hypnosis much better than anyone else. I can make people do whatever I want to. Naruto refused to take the bait and crossed his arms. That was not feasible. Naruto snorted, I don't believe you, at the notion. He could become Hokage if he could use hypnosis. I dunno. The village and the council could be mesmerized by him. He was able to obtain anything he desired. The possibilities were endless. Grinning, Shisui took Naruto by the arm. The two vanished from view in an instant, leaving only a wind gust in their wake. Neji, upon learning of Hinata's plan to have dinner with Naruto, shook his head in shock. Was she insane? Though he didn't know much about Naruto, he was aware that he was a Uchiha and that most adults detested him. Did she really think this would go over well with Hiashi? To calm himself, he had to inhale deeply. All he wanted was to keep her safe. Hiashi wouldn't tolerate this and would most likely punish her as well. Neji turned to face Hinata, who was approaching erect, and said, Are you sure you don't want to rethink this? She seemed to exude a peculiar confidence that he had not previously observed, for whatever reason. She said, Hi, without faltering or hesitating at all. I will convince Hiashi to allow me to do this. I need to stand up for myself. Naruto would do the same. Neji shook his head, attempting to talk her out of it. Naruto doesn't know Hiashi-sama. He might put the curse mark on you over something like this. Hinata stopped dead in her tracks at this statement and turned to look intensely at Neji. I think you don't know me. Everyone seems to forget that I am not a Hyuga. I'm a Senju. I only live with the Hyuga, and train with you. I'm not actually a Hyuga. He can't control me like he owns me. With raised eyebrows, Neji watched as Hinata bounded off toward the Hyuga compound. Why had she suddenly become so determined? How had Naruto addressed her? She had to have heard whatever he said. Neji's thoughts abruptly stopped when a fully grown man appeared out of nowhere, crawling on all fours and barking like a dog. What the hell? Rubbing his eyes, he checked if he was seeing what he believed he was. As expected, the man kept moving forward, scuttling along the ground with his arms and legs while barking like a dog. That was really strange. On the rooftop, Naruto and Shisui collapsed with uncontrollable laughter. Naruto held his stomach tightly, struggling to breathe. After a minute or two, Shisui managed to gather his thoughts and stood up straight, grinning at Naruto. He said, See, I told you that I can make someone do anything I want them to, as Naruto continued to have breathing difficulties. Though I must admit, I really never would have thought of making a man run like that and bark like a dog, through the middle of the streets. That was genius. When Naruto finally managed to get to his feet, he wiped a tear from his eyes. He was so excited that he exclaimed, Wow! I can't believe you can actually control other people's minds. That's so cool. Shisui gave a nod of agreement. It was really awesome. I really want to be able to use that power, Naruto begged. Can you teach me that technique? Please, Ni-chan. I really want to learn that. Shisui scowled at this and gave Naruto a pat on the head. Sorry, bro. It's a technique only someone with the Sharingan can learn, and not even that. Itachi doesn't know how to use it either, and he's had his Sharingan since your age. Shisui gave Naruto a tender hair rub, but still, his face fell. He attempted to cheer, come on, Naruto. You can still use the Kawarimi. And until you learn how to use the Shunshin like me, you should master that technique. No one ever thought that someone could be famous for the Shunshin, but I did it. Maybe you could make the Kawarimi famous one day, like Naruto no Kawarimi. Naruto grinned once more, finding that appealing. His older brother Shisui was a well-known speedster and Shunshin user. Shisui served as his role model. Although Naruto wasn't old enough or capable of using his brother's technique yet, it was obvious that he wanted to learn it too and be just as cool as him. Thus, up until that point, he had been practicing with the Kawarimi. For Naruto, the ability to travel at a high speed was appealing, and using the Kawarimi was similar to teleporting. He would do whatever it took to get the hang of it for now. Naruto yelled, "Yeah, let's go practice," and raised his fist in the air. Though he shook his head, Shisui laughed. Gazing at his watch, he countered, "How about after lunch? We have to make it over to Itachi's house now for lunch, but we can train afterwards. Besides, you have to tell Makoto-san to prepare for Hinata coming over." That evening, later, Hyuga Manor in her room, Hinata paced back and forth, gripping her stuffed fox doll tightly. She wasn't even sure if she had the courage to confront Hiyashi, even though at first she had thought it would be simple. She had to do it, but there is just no way that he would let her do something like this. It was time she told him that she didn't have to follow his instructions. He needed to accept the fact that she wasn't a Hyuga. She stormed out of her room, gaining emotional momentum as she went, leaving the doll on her bed. She'd go to this length for Naruto. When she finally arrived at his office, she inhaled deeply. She would have to knock before she could enter his domain, anger or not. It was required to that extent. He said, "Come in," before she had a chance to knock on the door. Hinata's eyes widened briefly, then she managed to calm down. After all, Hiyashi possessed the Byakugan, so it was not shocking that he would be able to tell when someone was outside his door. She opened the door cautiously and walked calmly up to his desk, where he was seated. "Hinata," he said, casting a curious but icy glance at her. "I did not summon you. Why have you arrived in my office?" Hinata took a few more deep breaths and then met his gaze directly, giving him an equally fierce look that slightly irritated him. She said, "Hiyashi-sama, I have a request," trying her hardest not to fumble her words or come across as weak. Raising an eyebrow, he bided his time for her to continue. "Tonight, I have been invited over for a formal dinner by one of the students in my class. I wish to attend." Hiyashi's eyes grew serious as he thought about the concept. Formal dinners are beneficial to clan alliances, such has been tradition. "Tell me, what clan has invited you over? Surely, had they wanted to ally with the Hyuga, they would have consulted me, and not you." Knowing his reasoning, Hinata nodded. "This isn't about clan alliances, this is more for enjoyment. Normally I would have declined this invitation, but I realized that it would be a good opportunity to find out more about this student." Hiyashi arched an inquisitive eyebrow. "There is a talented student in your class that you wish to analyze?" With the hope that Hiyashi would simply say, "Yes," Hinata nodded. She had a strong desire to leave this room. She was beginning to lose her temper with Hiyashi, and she wasn't sure how long she could keep it together. "You're sidestepping my earlier query," Hiyashi went on. "Who was it that invited you?" Hinata took a swallow. That was it. Avoidance did not occur. Uchiha Naruto. Stillness. Hiyashi did not move an inch, so Hinata could have sworn he had frozen solid. She was finding it hard to keep her eyes open from the intense way he was staring at her. His Byakugan had somehow come on, and his glare was nearly causing her physical pain. "Go from my office right now," Hiyashi finally said, icily. "Do not attend our dinner tonight, as I think you need time to consider your foolish ways. To even bring such a matter into my office." Hinata did not move an inch from her position of stillness. She refused to move. She was determined to carry out this task. "No. Hiyashi-sama," she said, keeping her feet firmly planted. The word appeared to make Hiyashi wince. "I will be attending this dinner at the Uchiha's." Hiyashi knocked his hands on the surface of his desk and got up abruptly. "You won't, will you?" he exclaimed, raising his voice. To his utter surprise, though, Hinata also raised her voice and showed no signs of giving up. She stepped forward and yelled back at him, "This is my choice. You are not my father. You can't tell me everything I have to do. You are forgetting that my blood is Senju, not Hyuga." Hinata whirled around and exited the office, slamming the door shut behind her. Hiyashi quickly sat back down at his desk and gave the door a hard, nearly hole-boring glare. He was so furious, in fact, that he didn't appear to notice a little plant that was hidden and on the edge of the room, growing up through the wooden floor. Training grounds. Uchiha compound. Naruto remained motionless, taking in his surroundings. He was waiting for dinner while working out with Shisui. Makoto was overjoyed to learn that Hinata would be visiting, and oddly, Fugaku didn't appear to be bothered either. Nobody was surprised by Itachi's stoicism, and Sasuke was annoyed that a Hyuga was visiting his home. Naruto pondered the length of time it would take for Sasuke and Hinata to become friends. Their last names were the only thing separating them, so in his view, there was no need to make a swish. Just as a dull kunai passed by his head, Naruto leapt to the side. With a light landing, he swiftly focused his keen eyes on the person hidden among the trees who had thrown it. In the same instant, Naruto leapt up to fight Shisui in the trees by using the chakra in his feet. Naruto frowned thoughtfully as Shisui vanished before he could land on the branch. He was suddenly struck in the back by multiple dull kunai, which sent him sprawling to the ground in agony. Laughing at his success, Shisui, who had materialized in a different tree, discovered that Naruto had burst into a cloud of smoke, leaving only a log in his place. Shisui now had the opportunity to avoid the thrown kunai, but instead he just cocked his head to the side, letting the kunai impale the tree behind him innocuously. Naruto, who had thrown it, was met with a smile as he called out to him. He taunted, "Getting better, Naruto-chan." But Naruto just grinned in response. Shisui's eyes widened as Naruto vanished out of sight. What had Naruto done that he couldn't avoid Shin? Shisui suddenly widened his Sharingan eyes and ducked, letting Naruto's fist fly above him. Surprising himself, he turned to see Naruto standing on the branch behind him. However, before he could retract his fist, Shisui vanished once more and materialized on the ground. "How did you do that?" Shisui asked the beaming Naruto, who was breathing heavily from his extensive training. "You can't Shunshin." Naruto acknowledged that with a nod. "But I can substitute. I used the Kawarimi to substitute myself with the kunai in the tree behind you." Shisui gradually grinned as she realized Naruto's strategy. "So the kunai weren't meant to hit me. You expected me to dodge them, so then you could substitute with them afterwards." Looking to the side where Naruto had been standing earlier, he saw that, in fact, Naruto had replaced the kunai he had thrown into the tree with himself, and the kunai was now on the ground. Shisui praised, "That's awesome, Naruto. That technique almost reminds me of the Yondaimi's jutsu." Naruto gave a nod. He was a self-confessed bookworm who devoted most of his leisure time to the library. The Yondaime, the most well-known and former Hokage, had the ability to instantly teleport between kunai, allowing him to kill hundreds in a split second. Naruto had developed his own plan based on that notion. Nevertheless, Naruto thought it was a great idea even though he could only substitute with one kunai rather than hundreds. Still, that's not enough. Naruto leapt into the air to escape as Shisui swiftly breathed out a tiny fireball while holding up his hand to his mouth. He launched multiple blunt kunai at Shisui while he was still in the air, and this time, Shisui leapt far to the side. But Naruto replaced the kunai with one before it even touched down, landing softly. He caught the other two he'd thrown in midair and threw them at Shisui once more, who was already in the air. He had believed that he would finally hit Shisui, but the Uchiha managed to Shunshin and vanish from view even though he was in midair. With a frown, Naruto scanned the area for any disturbance that might reveal his brother's whereabouts. Sensing he still had time, he pulled out more kunai and threw them in all directions, storing them for when he needed to replace them later. They would give him locations to go so that he could. Smack! Shisui laughed and slapped the boy on the back of his blonde head as she emerged behind Naruto. But his giggling was short-lived as Naruto vanished and was replaced by a log. But Shisui cursed because this log had explosive tags embedded in it. Whoa! After making another substitution with one of his previously thrown kunai, Naruto grinned contentedly and kept a safe distance from the explosion. Even though he knew it wouldn't be enough to win Shisui over, watching her flee made him laugh. He looked up to see Shisui laughing too. Not at all offended, he complimented, "That was a cool move. Substituting with an explosive log, awesome. You almost got me. You really are taking that Kawarimi to a new level. I'm sure that one day you'll be famous for that technique. If you two buffoons are done destroying our training grounds, then it's time to return to our house." Shisui and Naruto turned to stare in shock at Itachi, who was crossing his arms and sitting coolly on a nearby tree trunk. "I believe a certain Hyuga is trying to enter our compound now, as well." Immediately, Naruto's expression brightened and he gave a fist pump. Shouting, "It's Hinataheim!" He raced rapidly toward the front of the compound. He was gone from view in a matter of seconds, running through the woods as quickly as possible. Itachi glanced at Shisui for a moment, and as soon as they met eyes, they burst out laughing. Itachi asked, attempting to hold back his laughter, "Heim? He just called her princess." Naruto was surprisingly fine. even though he expected to be out of breath when he reached the front gates at the pace he was running. He arrived just in time to witness the front guard fighting with a young girl, which made him smile. I'm telling you for the last time, I'm not going to let a little Hyuga girl into the compound, you especially. Listen, I personally have nothing against you, but clan tradition. I don't think Fugaku-sama would appreciate if. Hinata. Naruto exclaimed, pointing to her as soon as she came into view. She sighed in relief as she waved back. The guard who had been preventing Naruto from entering turned around, startled. He exclaimed in confusion, Naruto-san. As soon as Naruto reached the location. You know this Hyuga? Naruto gave a head nod. Yeah, she has been invited over for dinner, Dad allowed it too. The Uchiha's gaze grew wide. With caution, he inquired, Fugaku-sama. Allowed this? Not sure if this was a joke or not. Naruto grinned broadly and nodded. With a casual shrug, the guard ninja sighed to himself. I never thought I would be the one to let a Hyuga enter here, but sure kid, you can come in here if you Naruto says it's alright. When the man moved aside, Hinata grinned too and entered through the opening. She took in everything she could as she gazed about the compound in awe. It was really amazing to stroll around the Uchiha compound. It felt like strolling through a holy garden. Laughing, Naruto took hold of Hinata's hand and pulled her forward, saying, Let's go, Hinata-heim. Dinner's ready. It's time for you to meet my family. Weary, Sasuke took a seat in his seat. It had been a real treat for him to be training with Itachi today. Unbelievably, Itachi was incredibly indolent, and he hardly ever trained him. Therefore, Sasuke would make the most of the training whenever Itachi agreed. It made sense that he was so exhausted now because he had completed some challenging training today. He was also upset that Hinata, a Hyuga Senju, would be eating dinner with him tonight. He had a plan, and Naruto had a plan that would work. However, everything had to change when this one girl entered the picture. Naruto would now have to disgrace himself and the Uchiha by acting like the worst. Oh no. Itachi took his customary place next to Sasuke and said, You seem to dislike our appointed dinner. Dinner was almost ready, and Makoto would be almost done when Naruto returned with Shisui in a moment. With a sneer, Sasuke put his hands over his face. And you seem to be fine that there is a Hyuga walking through our compound, and is about to eat dinner with us. Itachi shook his head and leaned back icily. Shisui arrived, raised his own chair, and took a seat at the larger than usual table. Yeah, but you have to remember that this girl means a lot to Naruto. I'm pretty sure that she was his first friend. Sasuke gave a nod. Yeah, I'm doing this for Naruto, which is the only reason I haven't left yet. Shisui grinned and clapped his hands. Great. Then there's no reason why we can't have run, right? The house's sliding front door opened, signaling Naruto and his visitor's arrival. As though that weren't enough, Naruto let out a loud cry. We're here. Makoto set the scene with a happy clap of her hands. After setting everything down, she approached the front section to welcome Hinata. She was about to speak when she met Hinata when she bowed respectfully in front of her and clasped her hands together. With grace, Hinata said, I am honored that you allow me to attend this meal with you. However, Makoto laughed, making Hinata look up anxiously as though she had said something incorrect. Makoto grinned down at Hinata and said, You don't have to bow. This isn't a formal dinner, it's just fun, okay? Before Hinata could reply, Fugaku waved at her as he walked down the hallway. With a nod of the head from Hinata and Naruto, he said, Ah, so you must be Hinata, correct? Great. Why don't we sit down together and have dinner already, alright? Makoto nodded and hurried to gather everyone together. Together, Naruto, Hinata, and Fugaku made their way into the kitchen. At the head of the table was Fugaku, with Naruto seated beside a silent Sasuke and Hinata to his side. Dinner had arrived when Makoto also sat down at the table, finishing the last plate. Now was the time to mingle. Night, Kiri. 3 months later, clad in a black, high-collared cloak with red clouds embroidered on it, Yahiko stood atop the hill and peered down with his all-seeing Rinnegan eyes. Under the full glow of the unsettling moonlight, the spiral orange tint in his eyes seemed to radiate sorrow as if a horrible scene were being depicted beneath him. Below, in the mist-filled valley, fire was raging while a massive conflict, no, a war, raged on. Blood was spilled, and people screamed into the night in terror. This was the war. The very war that Yahiko would eventually lose. All of this would come to an end when his eyes and power brought about peace. Yahiko was searching for members of his new organization by moving across the map. He needed to accomplish the same for the rest of the world as he had brought leadership and peace to aim. There would be an end to war only when the ninja land was united under a single ruler. But he needed his own formidable force before he could take the lead. To defeat every other village, even with all of AIM under his control, he needed strength, and he set out to find it. In order to become intimately familiar with every village, he would bring together members from each one, in addition to. Yahiko's eyes widened momentarily, and in that same instant, he took a black blade out of his long sleeve and held it at his side. Hold on. As soon as his blade was in position, it collided with another weapon, but Yahiko stopped it. With great attention, Yahiko studied the weapon pressing against him, and to his surprise, it was made of bone? Yahiko vanished from where he was standing and reappeared safely away from his unexpected young assailant. The assailant was no older than 8 years old, but before he could respond, the person in possession of the unusual weapon extended his hand and exclaimed, "Teshi Senden." Surprisingly, Yahiko was shocked to see the full tips of this strange boy's fingers shoot out at him at a high speed, probably fast enough to pierce him. But Yahiko had more than enough time to raise his hand in defense because his eyes could see every movement and could even see into the future. The bullets of bone stopped in midair and frozen in place, stopping meters before they even touched him. Yahiko let go of his hand and the bullets all fell to the ground unharmed. The child lunged forward once more, brandishing his peculiar bone sword, but before he could come into contact with Yahiko, he too froze, his Rinnegan staring back at him. "You must have arrived late for the battle below," Yahiko remarked, peering sharply into his opponent's thoughts. The boy with white hair growled and made an attempt to move, but his efforts were met with complete inaction. "I am not your enemy," Yahiko went on. "I am not from Kiri. I am merely observing the battle." The boy with white hair, who for some reason was also shirtless, seemed to be at ease. Yahiko saw this and let go of his technique, giving the child some movement once more. Yahiko raised an inquiring eyebrow as the boy said, I apologize for attacking. I am indeed late for this battle. My master thought I wasn't ready to fight, though I escaped anyways. I must be going now." The young child leapt backwards, heading towards the battle below. With that, Yahiko turned to face the battle below as he slowly made his way back to his previous position. Why was this boy acting so courteously, and why had he been kept out of the fight? Yahiko's gaze followed this man into the fray. He had demonstrated an intriguing talent, the ability to exert some degree of control over his bones. Maybe this could work out. He would have to wait and see. Kimimaro sat down by a pond and gazed sorrowfully in his own mirror. He was the lone survivor of the Kagaya clan, and the battle from last night had been lost. By the time he got there, over half of his clan had already passed away, so he had come too late. Without a doubt, he was his clan's prodigy. For more than a century, he was the only one with complete control over his bones, and he was also pretty damn good with them. It was unfortunate that he was too content to never provide for his clan, who were destined for war. However, he had lost his purpose and last night would be the last he saw of his clan. He was no longer a useful tool. He could just as well. He felt someone behind him and got up quickly, drawing a bone or dagger. As it turned out, he was not too far behind a man with orange hair who was lounging on a tree in a laid-back manner while wearing a dark robe. After a moment, he realized that this man was the one he had fought with the previous night, when he had briefly faced off against a man with the most peculiar eyes. Yahiko said, "You're not a useless tool," shocking Kimimaro by seemingly reading his thoughts. "Yes, the Kagaya may be dead, and they may no longer have a use for you, but you truly have talent. I watched your battle last night, and I was impressed." Kimimaro said, "It wasn't enough to save my people. It wasn't enough to." Yahiko countered, "You fought against Kiri, one of the strongest villages in the world. Even I do not yet have the strength to take over an entire nation, yet, or at least not enough strength to do it and have the village standing afterwards. But soon, I will have the manpower to do whatever I please. I am recruiting my own army. An army with around 10 captains, 10s rank ninja without loyalties, loyal only to me. And I believe that you, Kimimaro, would be a perfect addition to my ranks. You are a ninja from Kiri, one who understands this village and the land around it. If I am correct, you were raised in Kiri with the Kagaya before they abandoned the village, correct? Astonished that this stranger knew so much about him, Kimimaro was unable to reply. Who was this man? The man approached Kimimaro and said, "Join me, and you will never lose your purpose again." This man seemed to exude strength and confidence despite being no older than 18. Join me and you will help bring peace to the world. With his weapon down, Kimimaro cast his thoughts to what lay ahead. For the 8 years of his life, he had served the Kagaya. He had no life now, no reason to exist. This man was giving him a second chance at something he sorely needed. I accept. However, I have a question, he said, earning the orange-haired man's curious glance. What is your name? Yahiko turned around and grinned, staring up at the sky. You may refer to me as leader. Konoha. 3 months had passed since Naruto had joined the academy, developed his plans, and performed his duties to the best of his abilities in every manner. He was even more of a slacker in class than Shikamaru, who dozed off the entire time. The class leader, Iruka, was always picking on him, telling him that Naruto would never show him the side of him that he truly possessed. Well, he was right. To ensure that he would be on the same team as his 2 friends, Sasuke and Hinata, he had to go above and beyond. They had been performing their roles to perfection as well, I thought of them. Though Hinata was also studying, she was right behind Sasuke in maintaining his lead as the best. When Naruto had free time, he would assist her in her studies. He would either teach her, which she found very helpful, or he would give her a scroll or a book and instruct her to read it by the end of the week. He knew she hadn't let him down yet because he would sometimes ask her questions about the books. She had to be the smartest, but given the competition in their class, it wasn't as simple as it seemed. There was a lot of talent in the room, which surprised Naruto. Granted, most of the class was inexperienced with this material and was functioning at the level of an academy student, but some students performed above expectations. Numerous clan heirs were in the class. Some had talent that was obvious, while others had talent that was hidden. One boy, called Shino, was a quiet boy who wore dark sunglasses and always sat in the back, close to Naruto's group. Though he never demonstrated any talent, Naruto was the most tired of him for some reason. Similarly, Naruto was positive that Shikamaru, the student who dozed off in class, was considerably stronger and smarter than he appeared to be. It seems that by examining Shino, Shikamaru, and himself, he wasn't the only one with a talent that was being withheld. However, why? Who was aware? Now all he knew was that he was going to have to enter a nearby alley or face certain death. Grinning, he turned and walked peacefully into the closest alleyway. He could hear multiple voices above the throng on the street, looking for him. Actually, class had begun an hour ago, and Naruto had intended to make a detour to a delicious ramen bar that Shisui had shown him some time ago. Nevertheless, Iruka didn't like that he skipped class, so he made sure Naruto would go by force. If he didn't show up, he would send Chunin to literally drag him back to class, but Naruto didn't seem to mind. He was a pro at disliking these guys, after all. Check the alleys. With a sigh, Naruto idly took a kunai out of his pocket. There was a long ninja wire attached to this unique kunai. Ninja wire was very helpful, and Naruto carried a full reel of it, at least 50 meters long, on his hip, thanks to Konoha's weapon store. This wire was unique because, when he inserted chakra into it, it turned invisible, a very practical feature. He threw the wired blade onto the roof while looking up, and then he used his chakra to make the wire invisible. At that moment, 2 Chunin entered the alley and hurriedly looked around for any dumpsters or indications of Naruto. They realized after a few seconds that there was nothing else in the alley save a standard kunai lying on the ground. Shrugging, they moved on to look in other places. Now on the roof, having made a substitution with his thrown kunai, Naruto laughed. He swiftly retracted the kunai to his hand with the wire, employing a very practical D-rank ninja move that caused the wire to instantly zip the kunai to his hand. Grinning, he spun around and put the kunai pack in his pouch. As he froze, the wire disconnected itself and the pack was retracted into his reel. Thought you could skip class, huh? With a look of anger on his face, Iruka crossed his arms and looked down on Naruto. Not today, you won't. You're coming with me. Taking advantage of the complaints, he grabbed hold of Naruto's black Uchiha shirt and pulled him all the way back to the academy. Everyone fell silent as Naruto was thrown into class, fixing his gaze on the new blonde student. While the Chunin went in search of Naruto, Mizuki, the class's secondary teacher, filled in for Iruka. Naruto, please take a seat. Iruka yelled as he entered the classroom. How can you ever expect to become a genin if you don't show up to class? Ignoring his fellow student's snickers, Naruto shrugged and made his way to the back of the classroom. He could see with his keen eyes that Shikamaru had just slouched over and silently mouthed the word, troublesome. He then turned to face Shino, who was silently staring at him through dark glasses, making it impossible for Naruto to see any emotion in him. Shikamaru and this other boy in glasses thought he was a zero, just as he had predicted, as did the teachers and the entire class. He knew there was more to the man than what first appeared since he had taken the time to study the Aburame clan and discovered that they were generally intelligent. As Naruto passed by, Shino simply adjusted his glasses and turned back to the teacher. The fair-haired pupil positioned himself between Sasuke and Hinata. Naruto grinned back at Sasuke as he gave him a verbal greeting and a knowing look. Conversely, Hinata muttered something inaudible to Naruto, prompting him to cast her a suspicious glance, which she evaded. Recently, Hinata had been acting differently. Upon reflection, he realized that she had become more reserved and soft-spoken ever since he invited her to dinner. But why? The dinner had gone off without a hitch. His whole family had warmed up to her, Sasuke included, as well as Fugaku. So why would she? For the third time, Iruka yelled, "Naruto!" and startled Naruto out of his daze. He glanced up at the patiently waiting but irritated teacher. Answer the question, please. Naruto's gaze shot to the board with the questions and historical notes about Konoha on it. The final query, to which there was no response, posed the following. Which three ninja make up the Sannin? Naturally, Jiraiya, Tsunade, and Orochimaru. What kind of inquiry was that? But Naruto still needed to make sure he didn't come across as an expert. He looked back at Iruka and shrugged his shoulders. I don't know, he began, feigning a thorough thought. Wasn't the Sannin a restaurant or something? Laughter erupted instantly throughout the class, and Iruka smacked his head in frustration. After a duration of 30 seconds, the class managed to revert to silence. He blasted, "No, they weren't a restaurant. Perhaps if you came to class on time and did your homework you would know." Hinata, would you care to answer the question for your clueless friend? At the part about being clueless, Hinata's eyebrows furrowed a little, but Naruto quickly shoved her under the table. She answered, "Hi," albeit a little slowly and in a quiet voice. The Sannin were three legendary ninja from Konoha, consisting of Jiraiya-sama, the Toad Sage, Tsunade-sama, the Slug Princess, and Orochimaru-sama, the Serpent Master. They all have disbanded from Konoha, though Jiraiya remains loyal to this day. Iruka grinned as she nodded and penned her basic statements on the board. Great job. You nailed it. If only some of your smarts would rub off on Naruto. They laughed at Iruka's sarcasm, and Hinata scowled once more, though no one could see her expression. Once more, Naruto shrugged, leaned back, and grinned to himself. After 4 more years in this course, he would be able to shed his mask and become a true ninja. Everything was fine as long as he was on the same team as Sasuke and Hinata, regardless of what the others thought of him. Since his first test resulted in that score, the class had considered him to be a zero, and they had continued to refer to him as such. Who gave a damn, though? He didn't care that he liked the name, Zero. They were unaware of his true potential. Nothing. Aim. Following several weeks. None at all. Looking down, Yahiko saw his ring, which was silver with a red center and the kanji, Zero, written on it. With the help of his newly formed group, he had made rings and cloaks for Kimimaro, Konan, and himself, as well as for anyone else he might soon bring on board. It took him some time to come up with a name for this group, but in the end, he settled on Akatsuki, which means dawn. It was very fitting that the organization was named Dawn because he had promised Conan that he would show her a new dawn, one free of rain and suffering. They would usher in a new era of peace and be the dawn of humanity. Yahiko took a seat on his throne and closed his eyes to focus. Now, his organization was taking shape, and all was proceeding according to plan. Kimimaro had turned out to be a very useful addition. The 20-year-old was incredibly talented. His use of Shikatsumyaku, or dead bone pulse, was amazing, and his taijutsu was perfect. Kimimaro had been the only person to survive the Battle of Kiri, effortlessly dispatching ninja until his own clan was vanquished. And Kimimaro was getting even more skilled now that Yahiko was teaching him one-on-one. Actually, though, Yahiko felt a presence enter the room and he stopped thinking. When he opened his eyes, he saw Conan in front of him dressed in Akatsuki's official attire. She had a ring with the kanji, 1, engraved on it on her own finger. She said, "I have interesting news to report," as soon as he met her gaze. He gave her a smile and let her go on. He said, "Please tell," waiting for her to continue. With a nod, she continued with her report. Just yesterday, the tyrant Reikage had been assassinated by an unnamed ninja from Kumo itself. Yahiko raised an inquisitive eyebrow. Really? The Reikage of Kumo was killed, and by a ninja from his own village. And this was confirmed. Conan gave a nod. Hi. They will be trialing him within this week to determine his fate, and I don't doubt that they'll most likely kill. Yahiko asked, trial. She was very confused by this. A ninja strong enough to kill the Reikage, the legendary Kage on par with Hanzo, was caught afterwards. Conan shook her head this time. No. He turned himself in afterwards. I know it's strange, but that is what I have heard. Yahiko reclined, lost in contemplation. A ninja strong enough to take out the Kumo-born Reikage, who had betrayed the village, perfect. Conan, he said, getting off the throne. I think we've just found our newest member. I will prepare to offer an invitation immediately. Konoha, early in the morning. Itachi hurried up the stairs to the Hokage's office while wearing an Anbu mask over his face. He was clad in his entire Anbu armor set, complete with a robe that served as a status symbol. Shisui had recently, within the last month, passed the Jonin test with flying colors and become a full-fledged Jonin. Itachi needed to do better than that because he couldn't allow Shisui to surpass him in any manner. At the age of 15, he held the position of captain in the Anbu Black Ops. The Anbu's leader, he oversaw all divisions, including research, assassination, document recovery, seek and destroy, and the torture squad. He was proud, too, and Fugaku was very proud of him. He thus had a great deal more responsibility now, which he found enjoyable. It was his responsibility to report to the Hokage after receiving reports from every member of the Anbu. As the captain of the Anbu, the only people who could surpass him were the Hokage, his father, the head ninja of Konoha, and the captain of the police force. That's why his Anbu tattoo went off early this morning, alerting him to his summons, interrupting his breakfast. It seems that one of his informants in other villages found something significant and dispatched a messenger hawk to him. After reading the letter, he hurried to the Hokage's office, where he was currently standing. It only took 2 courteous knocks to get Hiruzen to let him in. When he did, he entered the room with a graceful gait and stopped in front of the large desk. Itachi, report, Hiruzen said, his expression darkening. This was not the planned meeting, and unless something significant had happened recently, the head of Anbu did not typically report to him in this manner. Itachi removed his mask with grace and nodded. It's funny how the mask was supposed to hide his identity, because most of his comrades recognized him right away. Itachi said, I got a letter from one of my contacts. The Reikage has been assassinated, and they will appoint a new leader within the week. The Hokage had to force himself to sit up in shock as his eyes grew wide. The news was excellent. Over the past few years, Konoha and Kumo have been in a very tense situation, especially after they attempted to kidnap Hinata. They were really about to go to war. The Reikage was an awful despot, and Hiruzen was uncertain as to whether he would go after Konoha or not. However, there might be a chance for peace if the man, who was renowned for being incredibly skilled and just as strong and cruel as Hanzo had been assassinated, which was impressive in and of itself. Maybe Hiruzen could persuade the new Raikage to sign a peace treaty with Konoha, but the old Raikage would never accept one. Sarutobi yelled, "Summon the council immediately. And you will attend as well. I think I have a special mission planned for you." "Hi, somewhere else. Itadakimasu." Naruto said grace, then threw himself into his bowl of ramen with a quick smile. Sitting next to him, Shisui laughed at his antics but then jumped in just as quickly. A sympathetic woman in front of them asked, leaning over the counter and resting her head on her palms, "Are you two ever going to learn any manners?" When Shisui raised his head to take a breath, she grinned and laughed. He gave her a frustrated roll of the eyes. "I apologize, Mom. I promise to be more organized the next time," he said with a hint of sarcasm. To further emphasize his point, he placed a napkin beneath his neck. But that made the girl laugh even harder. Since she was 5 years old, Ayame, the 15-year-old daughter of Ichiraku, the proprietor of a well-known ramen bar, has been serving Shisui ramen. She loved to cook when she was younger and had always imagined herself taking over her father's ramen bar and maybe opening a larger eatery. Since she could walk, her father had taught her all the tricks of the trade in the kitchen, and at the age of 5, she started working as his personal assistant at the ramen bar. It was a memorable day for her and Shisui alike when she prepared and served her very first bowl of ramen. Even though he had first tried ramen when he was 5 years old, Shisui also adored it. He went to the ramen bar, the closest food source, after training, and ordered a bowl of pork ramen. Upon glancing at the weary and hungry boy, Ichiraku realized that he could retrieve food from the trash and Shisui would devour it. He reasoned that Ayame's first bowl made for a customer was a good opportunity for practice. It turns out that Ayame made it, and she gave it to Shisui, who finished it in less than a minute. He came back every day, specifically asking for ramen from Ayame, the shy little girl who needed to use a stool to raise her head above the counter, because he loved it so much. Shisui could count the number of times he has visited the ramen bar since more easily than the number of stars in the night sky. And he reasoned that he would like ramen too, since he and Naruto had similar tastes. The blonde said that Naruto liked it even more than he did, which surprised him. They would come over here all the time, holding eating competitions and more. Shisui vowed that he spent over half of his earnings on this ramen, especially now that Naruto was enjoying it. After he finished his bowl, Ayame asked Naruto, "Shouldn't you be in class, Naruto-chan?" The boy with blonde hair shrugged casually. "Perhaps I could have a few minutes or two," Ayame chuckled, thinking Naruto's schemas were hilarious. How funny was it that he intended to be the last to die? Shisui shook his head, glancing at a make-believe wristwatch. "Naruto, as your future sensei, I cannot stress how important punctuality can be for a mission. You're going to class right now, mister." With a groan, Naruto lowered his head onto the counter. "Ah, you're not my sensei yet, Shisui. And you're not my dad either. Can't I wait a little while longer? Ayame, can you make me another bowl? Please." Ayame took a moment to carefully consider, striking the ideal contemplative pose. She said aloud while feigning disinterest. "I don't know. Well, your father said that you should go to class. I think you should too." Naruto gave a headshake. "Shisui is not my dad. He's my brother. He can't tell me to go to class." With a laugh, Shisui tousled Naruto's hair. He impersonated Fugaku and said, "Come on, son," in a low voice. "Listen to your mother now." Outraged by the parent game Shisui and Ayame were now playing, Naruto struck his head against the counter. With a wink, Shisui said, "Well, dear, I'm off to drop our little pumpkin at school." Which made Ayame laugh. "I'll come and pick you up later, we can do mom and dad stuff together." Ayame's cheeks turned rosy red, and Naruto moaned louder and banged his head even harder. Shisui laughed once more, adoring Ayame's expression. Unsurprisingly, Naruto shook his head and got up, brushing himself off. "Haha, I'm kidding. All right Naruto, let's go now. Say goodbye to your mother." "Bye, Mom." Pointing to Ayame's cheek, Shisui leaned in closer. Ayame giggled but her body temperature rose several degrees again. "Come on, honey, don't I get a goodbye kiss?" she exclaimed. She leaned forward in a moment and kissed Shisui's cheek. After raising his fist in the air, Shisui applauded. He exclaimed, "Sweet," and approached Naruto. "Let's go." With that, he snatched hold of Naruto's jacket and vanished from view, speeding to the academy with a shunshin. All by herself, Ayame picked up 2 empty bowls of ramen and blushed. Later on that day, Naruto abruptly awoke and wiped his eyes. He looked at the test that was in front of him, tired. He was extremely intelligent. This material, this stuff, was simply so beneath him. He cast a quick glance around, finding it amusing that most of the students appeared to be having trouble with the test. Children were genuinely thinking this test was difficult because they were perspiring and had nervous expressions on their faces. He smirked as he looked to the side and saw that Hinata was breezed through this test, circling answers with ease and speed. Glancing back at the exam, his attention came back to the opening query. What was the first Hokage's name? A. Sarutobi. B. Madara Uchiha. C. Senju Hashirama. D. None of the preceding. With a sigh, he considered which to complete. It is obvious that Hashirama Senju was the right response. Who didn't know that? Nevertheless, he had to pass the test with a minimum score of 51%, and it consisted of 35 questions, meaning he had to get at least 18 of them right. He enjoyed going above and beyond Iruka's rules. On every test he took, he received a score that was almost 50%. Please make sure to circle B. Yes, Naruto assumed he could make a mistake here and move on without further ado. Still, he had 18 more questions. No, you should circle B, since that is the response that ought to have been provided. Well, no, the correct response is Hashirama, but what on earth was he thinking? Hashirama was unworthy of it. Indeed, he did. Through his use of Mokuden Jutsu, he brought clans together to create Konoha. He was an amazing leader, powerful enough to subdue Biju. Madara could also do so. And see what happened to Hashirama. Not only did he die, but his entire clan also did. What level of leadership is that? That isn't totally accurate. Hinata was not dead. The only people who survived were her and her mother. That's not even true, really. Another slug escaped death, and then there was the other one who had left Konoha even before this occurred. That implies that only 4 Senju, Hinata, her mother, Tsunade, and him, were spared from the carnage. How is he thinking? Does he not even know these things? He had no idea how the Senju had passed away. It was harsh. I had even forewarned them that it would occur. They called me a fool when I told them what they didn't want to hear. Hinata was fortunate that her mother lived, as they deserved what happened to them. Maybe that was something her father had taught her. It was obvious that he needed to drink more water. What was going on because he was having such strange thoughts in his head? Hold on, his inner voice had told him that Madara had also died along with Hashirama. Then again, maybe not. What was meant by that? Madara's demise was verified. Oh my goodness, child. Later on, you're in for a huge surprise. Additionally, in 35 seconds. How come? For 33 seconds. What is meant by that? What is 33 seconds to? 30 seconds. As soon as Iruka called out to the class, Naruto's head shot up. Finish up now. You have 30 seconds to finish and turn in the papers. With shock, Naruto's eyes grew wide. For what duration was he asleep? What was the duration of his self-talk? He completed the test quickly, marking the correct answers with his circle. To receive a 51%, all he had to do was respond to 18 questions. Alright, hand in your tests now. With a sigh, Naruto circled the 18th question and got up to turn in his paper. He would still receive a 51% even if he chose not to respond to any of the other questions. Still, he had to get over thinking such strange things to himself. In any case, why the devil was he thinking that way? Later on that evening, Itachi, dressed in full Anbu armor, stood in front of the Konoha gates, his face hidden behind his Anbu mask. For this mission, he had thrown away his captain's robe because he didn't want it to get in the way. He wore the Anbu vest and carried everything else on his back, including a katana. He turned to face the group of people he had gathered. There was Kakashi Hatake, the sluggish Elite 21 who was about to leave the Anbu and turn Jonin. Anbu Aburame was the only Aburame who was a member of the group, and Tenzo was a powerful 20-year-old with Mokudan power. And lastly, he had included Shisui in the group. Shisui was the team's most valuable player by far. If the Raikage did not agree with the treaty at first, he could use his hypnotic powers to persuade him to sign it. He would go to Kumo with this team and give the peace treaty to the Raikage. He'd not be shocked to see them. Of course, they'd sent a messenger hawk to inform him of this earlier. Due to their talent, the Hokage and the council determined that Itachi should go on this mission with Shisui, and they had agreed to it. Itachi was selected right away since a high-ranking ninja personally delivered something as significant as a peace treaty. Maybe the trip would be enjoyable. If they arrived on time, they could also go to the ninja's trial to see who killed the previous Raikage. To Itachi's dismay and surprise, it appears that the assassin had confessed. "All right, team," Itachi said, looking directly at each person. Even Shisui was donning his retired Anbu mask. They were all dressed alike. "We will begin to travel now in Shunshin bursts. If we maintain a correct speed, we should arrive at Kumo by daybreak, just in time for the important trial and the formal inauguration of the new Raikage. Follow me carefully, and watch for any enemies along the way. Let's go." Hi. The 5 elite ninjas swiftly vanished into the wind and made their way to Kumo. Hyuga compound. Exhausted, Hinata toppled over and struck the ground hard. Her life at the Hyuga compound had become hell ever since she had spoken out against him and gone to eat dinner with Naruto. Like now, Hiashi was even colder than before, and every day he would train her cruelly until she was unable to stand. With a distasteful glance down at her, Hiashi said dryly, "I'm disappointed in your skill level. Neji is showing more talent than you right now, and he is of the branch family." With a painful cough, Hinata got to her feet slowly, cramping her words out, barely able to think straight. Gomen, Hiashi-sama, she couldn't get the image of her bed out of her head. That cozy, comfortable bed that was waiting for her. What is the duration of this training program and when does it end? Seated at the side of the dojo, Neji scowled darkly at the scene in front of him. He detested Hiashi's actions towards Hinata, but he was powerless to assist her. He said, "Hiashi-sama," which made the man turn and give him an equally fierce glare. "I believe that Hinata would benefit more from a good night's rest now. She should retire for the night." Smack. As Hiashi materialized in front of Neji, he gave him a forceful backslap. He yelled down at Neji, "You will not tell me what to do, branch member." Neji turned back to glare at Hiashi. "What I do with Hinata is my decision only. The next time you instruct me like that will be your last, and I will activate your seal so hard that you'll remember that day for the rest of your life." After saying that, Hiashi turned to leave the dojo. He said, "You are dismissed, Hinata," as he turned to walk away. "You seem pathetic today, and training you any more tonight would be a waste of my time." It was all Hinata had to do to stay upright, so she was unable to reply. She fell again by the time he had stormed off, but this time Neji was there to catch her before she hit the floor. Arigato, Neji-Nisan, she murmured, grinning up at him. She fell asleep quickly and passed out before he could respond. With a frown, Neji picked her up and dressed in bridal regalia. He had no idea how long Hinata would be able to endure the harsh training that Hiashi had given her. He was aware that Hinata's friendship with Naruto would annoy Hiashi, but he had no idea that in the months that followed, he would turn his resentment toward her. With a persistent frown, he carried her to her room and laid her down on her bed, wishing for her well. Kumo's next morning, with a sigh, he looked down at his hands' shackles, which were sealed with chakra-suppressive seals. Was there really any purpose for a trial? After all, he had turned himself in. Maybe the intention was to make him look bad in front of the village so that people who were sad that their Raikage had died could see who killed him. Not that anyone would miss that bastard, though. After killing him, he couldn't help but feel so complete. Since the man was dead, he essentially had no reason to live anymore. Why not have Kumo kill him instead of him, since he wouldn't kill himself? That didn't matter that she would detest him for doing it. He would at least get to see her once more. He was sitting by himself in a tiny, poorly lit prison with just a small crack in the wall letting in a little bit of sunlight. His messy, Coarse black hair cascaded over his face, giving him a deranged appearance. He had blood and dirt all over him, smearing against his naturally dark skin, a rare quality shared by only a few Kumo ninja. The walls were covered in seals, and his shackles were attached to chains that were set into the wall. It would have been tough for him to get away if he had desired to. In any case, why would they need so much time to hold someone who had turned themselves in? He was always surrounded by the force. How many seals there were to break it made no difference, he could connect to the force. He had taught himself how to do that years ago, but damn, it made him sound old. Come on, he was only 20 years old. But as it was, his life had been long enough. He looked down to see a pebble in front of him. The little rock slowly rose into the air at the man's will and levitated to eye level. Soon after, other rocks from all over the room began to float up next to the rock and stayed in the air perfectly still. He was too skilled for his hands to be needed to control his element. He could control the world around him as long as he had enough chakra to keep his heart pumping. From being a modest street magician to becoming the village's most wanted criminal, he had come a long way. He pondered what his acquaintances' opinions of him were now. Those who had dismissed him and mocked him would probably be unable to look at him at all. Actually, though, something off. Not much, but enough to mess with the building's natural chakra waves. He raised his head and squinted his eyes to compensate for the dim light. As per his intuition, an enigmatic figure emerged from the darkness in front of his cell, with the light only reaching the lower portion of his body. The man's long, dark robe, which had an odd red pattern on it, was visible to him. Clouds. Rizzo. All right, so this man also knew him. He was still perplexed as to how he had gotten into the prison so fast. Seals were all over the place, and Kumo's ninja were encircling the area. A regular shunshin wouldn't function at all. Born a peasant, the son of a carpenter, you were unable to join the ninja academy because you needed to make money for you and your father. You were special, ever since young. Most ninja here naturally have lightning as a base chakra, yet you had something different, something much stronger and rarer. Force. I have yet to see another ninja with that power. The chance of having force, the sixth and rarest element, as your main affinity, is the same chance of being born with a Sharingan and not be related to the Uchiha at all. You discovered your power yourself, and used it for common street magic. Eventually, your father died, and you had to use that as a full-time job to support yourself after your father died when you were 5. Surprisingly, you managed to befriend the daughter of the Raikage himself, and she taught you the basics of ninja art as you mesmerized her with your magic. Apparently, your relationship was too close for the Raikage, and he had forbidden you from ever seeing her again. You left Kumo for several years, honing your skills. Eventually, you returned, reuniting with the Raikage's daughter once more. One night, the Raikage found you too and ended up killing her. In return, you killed him. At some point in the recounting of his life, Rizzo had dropped the levitating stones in mild shock, taken aback that this stranger knew so much about him. An honorable story in my opinion, the mysterious man said. Who are you? When the man finally moved forward and his entire body was illuminated by the light, Rizzo asked in a smooth voice that never faltered in the slightest. The man appeared to be at least as young as he was, if not younger. He had strange orange hair, but the most intriguing feature of him was his spiraling eyes, which seemed to stare into his soul. Rizzo recognized the Rinnegan from before, so this wasn't a joke. Names aren't needed just yet. Yahiko's voice came from behind Rizzo, startling him a little because it shouldn't have been possible for him to appear behind him through the numerous seals that covered his prison. I understand your past. Yet I do not know this. Why turn yourself in? Yahiko said, making Rizzo frown even more. Your mind is well guarded, he said. Rizzo laughed softly to himself, trying to turn around but being limited by the chains. Since there was no justification for running away, where would I go? Why would I try to get away? What would I do? I find it to be too bothersome. After living my life and completing my divinely appointed mission, everything else is merely extra. With a sly smile on his face, Yahiko nodded. Maybe you haven't reached your objectives yet. Maybe you haven't discovered your true calling yet. What if I told you that I was able to provide you with meaning? At most, I'd laugh in your face, and if you kept trying, I'd hurt you. However, as you can see, I'm not in the mood to laugh and I'm not really mobile. Yahiko reappeared outside the prison and said, "You could, if you wanted to. I don't have time. People are coming. However, take my offer into consideration. You can contribute to world peace by using your abilities. You would be able to spare hundreds of others from experiencing what you did. Consider thinly." What would she do if she were in your position? Rizzo was starting to lose patience with the person at this point. Don't act like you know her. You don't. Though you don't know anything about it, you might be able to read my thoughts in some way. When Rizzo saw that there was no one to shout at, he stopped, and a moment later a ninja appeared in his field of vision and began to laugh at him. Our prisoner appears to be going insane. A few moments later, a number of additional ninja materialized, grinning down at him and yelling, "Be careful, guys, this one is crazy." Never look away from him for even a moment. He succeeded in killing Raikage-sama. There's no need to refer to that bastard as Sasama anymore. He's dead, chuckled one of the other ninja, turning to face the one who had said it. Personally, I believe the man should have died, but Rizzo is not to blame. However, since he killed our Raikage, we are required by law to put you on trial and then put to death. If not, Kumo would be under dictatorship. A new purpose, peace to the world, what would she do? Rizzo tuned out their conversation as the strange man's words replayed themselves in his mind. Oh no, this guy shows up and complicates things just when he had been certain he was going to die. Kumo, outside. Kumo was an interesting village. Sections of it were literally built into the sides of mountains. Another interesting thing was that a lot of people here had dark skin, something Itachi had never seen outside of Kumo. They were currently on one of the largest areas, where most of the village was waiting in front of the cage tower, and others were watching from other mountains. Every Kumo resident was literally watching the trial of the murderer as well as the inauguration of the next Raikage. Itachi and his group were patiently waiting amid the enormous crowd, all spread out among the crowd hidden from any potential enemies. The audience's clamor abruptly stopped when the tower's balcony door opened, some 15 minutes later, and at least 10 ninja wearing Jonin vests filed out of it, followed by 3 ninja with Anbu-like appearances. Eventually, a dark-skinned man with dark hair and a dark outfit, his hands chained together with chains and seals, walked slowly out of the doors. Itachi had his Sharingan activated, but he didn't need it to recognize the sheer number of chakra suppressors that were there. The crowd started muttering loudly right away, this had to be the assassin. Several other Anbu followed him out, and before long, the trial was underway. As the trial proceeded, the man would keep confessing to the crime, smoothing over Itachi's confusion about how the man had actually turned himself in. Surely he knew that killing a cage carried the death penalty. Why is the Anbu captain of Konoha attending the inauguration, may I ask? Itachi looked to his right and saw the man who had posed the question, a man with orange hair and strange robes. This man seemed familiar, even though Itachi knew he had never met him. But then, how had he known that he was the captain of the Anbu? He wasn't wearing his mask to draw attention to himself. That would be classified information, Itachi replied, being proper. He was taller than Itachi, but Itachi was only 15, so the man nodded his head. The man said, "You seem to be quite young. I wouldn't expect the leader of the Anbu to be as young as you," but he was still staring at the prisoner in front of the village. Strangely, Itachi remained silent, as if the man could almost read his thoughts. Though, of course, he wasn't that old either. In the world of ninjas, age is meaningless. Strong cages can come in all ages. That's absolutely true, the man nodded once more. Your cage appears to be older now, but the Yondaime of your village was quite young. I would also mention that the Amekage is young and the Tsuchikage is very old. Who was this guy, and how much knowledge was too much for him? The young man said, "You have potential, kid, but so does Rizzo. I'm eager to learn how exactly he dispatched the Raikage." Itachi gave a headshake, but the man shook his head too. "I doubt they'll tell us here at the trial how he died." Itachi turned to look at the man to see if he was kidding, but the man in the robes seemed to be taking things very seriously. "No, I will just ask him when this is done." Odd. The trial eventually came to an end. Raizo was led back into the building after being found guilty as a dead man. He was going to pass away quietly later today. Not long after, Raizo saw a big, similarly dark-skinned man with protruding muscles walk out the doors. After a brief exchange of words, the two went on their separate ways. Itachi was certain that the newcomer would become the next Raikage. When he turned to look, the knowledgeable man was gone, and he was about to ask how much he knew about this new cage. He had disappeared, and Itachi had no clue where he had gone. That scared the hell out of him. Itachi sensed when people arrived and departed using Shunshin. What had transpired? He felt a burst of chakra next to him, and to support his theory, he felt Shisui materialize nearby. Shisui inquired, "What's up, Itachi?" Itachi shrugged, thoughts elsewhere in the moment. "I saw that guy who you were talking with. Now that I think about it, doesn't he remind you of the Amekage who fought Hanzo years ago?" Itachi's breathing abruptly stopped and his eyes widened. "There's just no way. Shisui, I'm almost positive that that man is the Amekage. Somewhere else." Raizo was herded into yet another containment cell without much delay, and thrown in roughly before the door slammed behind him. This was it, he was going to die soon. His entire life was about to end, but strangely, he didn't feel as content as he had anticipated. He had been hoping to meet her again in the afterlife, but ever since that weird man with orange hair spoke to him, well. Bravo. Just as he was considering the man, with her back to the room wall, Yahiko said, "It would be a shame to waste a talent like yours. The world needs you." Raizo said, "I don't need the world," without even turning to face the man. "Enough is enough for me. Maybe you haven't yet gone through what I have. You won't understand how I feel until you've endured true suffering." Yahiko's Rinnegan eyes glared at the man and the room went dark. "I am at the same level as you are. It is our shared experience of pain that has strengthened us." Raizo shook his head, utterly disagreeing. "Until you have lost the one person you care most in the world about, your words don't mean shit." Yahiko gave a small nod, realizing what this man was getting at. "I continue to live for my beloved. Together, we defend our principles, and I protect her. Even though the person you loved is no longer with you, you can still uphold her values. The world is still in your hands." Raizo shook his head, unwilling to give this any more thought. The chains that bound his hands and wrists suddenly broke in half, releasing him. That was not feasible. Unless. Yahiko said coolly, "I have an interesting chakra, too, though mine is much stronger. You are strong, no doubt about it, but I can train you. Come along with me." Raizo did not move an inch as Yahiko was thrown back against the wall, and he stopped talking. Raizo straightened up and relaxed his shoulders while Yahiko recovered. He turned his head and angrily glanced at Yahiko. "I'm not interested," he said. "Moreover, you exude confidence. You're not stronger than, I doubt it." It was now Raizo's turn to be stopped, as he found himself forcefully hurled up against the wall with an unseen force holding his neck up. As he gasped for air, he was startled to see only the man's Rinnegan's glowing spiral eyes staring back at him. "I am definitely stronger than you," said Yahiko. "I am a god, you are just a man. I'll make you come if you won't listen to me right now, and you'll have time to consider it afterwards." The man's spiraling eyes were the last thing Raizo saw before going completely black and losing consciousness. Itachi sighed as he signed the document while standing in front of the new Raikage's desk. There would be no war between Konoha and Kumo after the treaty was ratified. His mission accomplished. Itachi said, "I'm glad that have decided to sign the treaty. Our Hokage will be pleased to find out that." "Raikage-sama." Itachi turned, annoyed that a man had barged into the office during a crucial meeting. How could he possibly say anything that would be important enough for him to interrupt a peace treaty signing? Raizo has escaped. Approximately 2 years later. Naruto was worried about his inner ideas. The voice in his head had evolved over time from being just an idea floating around to an actual voice, conversing with him. The fact that the voice was a man's and not his own startled him even more. Over the course of the last year, as the voice grew louder and louder, that had undoubtedly been decided. Naruto realized now that the thoughts he was recalling couldn't possibly be his own. On numerous occasions, the voice had displayed knowledge that he had never acquired. He would never, ever go to the hospital and claim to have voices in his head. In less than a day, that would put an end to his career as a ninja and place him in a room with padded walls. Indeed, regretfully, this village would reject the possibility of real power. And real power is having a voice in my head. Recalling the past, Naruto disagreed with the voice. He looked down from the building he was sitting on and shook his head angrily. He grinned as he saw Sasuke and Hinata strolling to class together in the congested streets. Though it had taken some time, he was happy that Sasuke and Hinata had finally become friends. It greatly simplified everything for their plan. Yo, Naruto. When Naruto turned to face his friend Shikamaru, he was startled to see him standing with his hands behind his head. Are you attending today's class? In 3 minutes, it will begin. Grinning and shrugging, Naruto looked down at the bustling streets once more. Possibly. However, I originally intended to visit the ramen stand first, and then I might visit the library or something else. Amused, Shikamaru arched an eyebrow. He was aware that Naruto was far, far smarter than the student body seemed to think. Still a library, perhaps. Iruka will never look for me there, Naruto said, and I'll be able to get ahead on whatever we're learning in class. Amused, Shikamaru shook his head. Difficult, he remarked. Naruto shrugged once more, grinning. Possibly. Would you like to participate? Shikamaru finally grinned and gave a head nod. The two of them strolled toward the ramen stands on the other side of the academy. Inside Naruto's subconscious, Madara said aloud, yes, this village truly does scorn the potential for power. However, this seal is gradually depleting our energy. They will be unable to ignore us for long. His power will soon grow to such an extent that... Why? From within his prison, the Kyuubi's voice boomed out, glaring down at the man standing in front of his cage in the hallway. They didn't actually need to see each other because their voices reverberated loudly throughout Naruto's subconscious, even though Madara wasn't in front of him. Why do you wish for our host to be powerful? Madara laughed. His strength will make Konoha despise him, and it will make him despise Konoha. There will be a massacre. The days of the Uchiha are past. Their time on Earth is running out so rapidly. Hopefully, sooner rather than later. In this manner, Naruto will be more devastated by the loss of his entire family, listen to me, and hate the village. Stupid, the Kyuubi declared, he won't hate the village. As the last Uchiha, the village is what will keep him sane. Madara disagreed, shaking his head. Not at all. The village hasn't killed the boy yet, and that's only because of the Uchiha. They despise him. However, they are not allowed to touch the child while he is wearing the Uchiha crest. However, once the Uchiha are extinct, the crest will mean nothing to them because Naruto lacks my clan's strength and bloodline. They'll exert every effort to harm the child. They are assisting me in achieving my goals in a lot of ways. Every time Konoha pushes Naruto away, he gets closer to destroying everything. They will primarily use his power as an excuse. I have no doubt about it. Villages dislike having ninjas with S ranks. They pose a threat to the village's security as soon as they obtain S rank status. I would generally agree with them. S rank is an extremely difficult level to attain with a sane mind. Most people who rise to such a position of power suffer from psychological issues. Since they lack the military might to keep them under control, smaller villages like Kusa automatically expel any S-ranked ninja from their community. Especially after the Uchiha are slaughtered, Konoha will attempt to drive Naruto out of the village once they realize his power. From then on, it will control Naruto's hatred. He'll want to get out of the village because of me. He'll want to destroy it because of me. It's time to eradicate dishonest systems from the world. The kind of council that is willing to exterminate a whole clan, including children and innocent members, must be destroyed. This village must be destroyed by the most intense fire so that it may rise again from the ashes. The Kyuubi uttered, I see, you want to take control of Naruto by making him the village's leader. Madara laughed darkly to himself, grinning. Certainly not. Not until Naruto is able to wipe out the village, a unique ability that he must take, will my schemes work out. My plans won't really start until he gains that authority. That power. You can't possibly think that, snarled the Kyuubi. Madara gave a nod. Indeed, The world can only be altered by that power. And I can only fulfill my destiny with that power. That power will belong to Naruto. You can't change the world. With his hands bound behind his back, Raizo yelled at Yahiko, knowing that Yahiko could channel his chakra into a unique black metal. Yahiko had taken him to a wide-open area on a field outside of AIM, where he was now on his knees. Konan, in her robes and her ring with the kanji 1 on it, and Kimimaro, who was 10 years old and wearing the same clothes and ring, but with 2 written on it, were watching from the side. Yahiko said in a monotone, "You do not understand my power, so you cannot believe me now. I am something stronger now that I have this power. I am no longer human. I'm a god." Raizo was suddenly freed from his chains, which fell to the ground. Gradually, he stood up and took out a pair of dark shades from inside his prison attire. He lifted them up to cover his eyes. He was going to fight, all of him. "Yes, Raizo," said Yahiko. "Come on, let's battle. I'll show you my power, the ability to alter the course of history, if you fight with everything you've got."
So this was it for today. I will continue the story in next part. Till then, we weeb offline.